I don't think I would last in jail. I don't know how you're doing it.
Not well.
Just don't want to depend on him, I guess. I think that's everyone's fear.
I miss your eyes. Your nose.
I like yours.
That's crooked. Maybe I can get beat up in here and someone will punch it so hard it fixes itself.
Sheriff's office, anybody inside? Announce your presence, make yourselves known.
I love you, and I miss you.
Stop.
I love you.
Thursday, July 1st, 2021 wasn't unlike any other in the Halderson household in Windsor, Wisconsin. Living inside the home was 50-year-old Bart Halderson, his wife, 53-year-old Krista, and their youngest son, 23-year-old Chandler. Chandler was a hard-working live-in college student with an exciting life and an extremely bright future. He was pursuing an IT degree at Madison Technical College, was a member of a police scuba diving team, a young employee at an insurance company, and had a job waiting for him at Elon Musk's prestigious company, SpaceX, upon graduating. He was, by all accounts, an overachiever, and his parents couldn't have been more proud. Chandler also liked to cook, and on the evening of the 1st, he'd made a pasta with scampi sauce dinner for his parents. Following dinner, he helped them gather and pack up tools and luggage in preparation for their 4th of July getaway. His parents had informed him over dinner that they were going on a weekend trip up to their family's cabin, 3 hours away in the woods of Langlade County. During the day, Chandler had noticed his father take a bank-wrapped stack of cash out of the safe in the basement. He'd also seen that his parents had taken a handful of bottles from the liquor cabinet. He'd noted both of these things as odd, but didn't think too much of it. After helping them get their belongings together, the three enjoyed some television before they all headed to bed. That would be the last time Chandler would see his parents alive. The next morning, Friday, July 2nd, Chandler's parents took off for the cabin before he awoke. Chandler enjoyed a day of peace and quiet until that afternoon there came a knock at the door. It turned out to be a coworker of Krista's. She hadn't shown up or called out of work that day, which was extremely unusual behavior for her. The colleague had tried contacting her by phone, but to no avail, so he'd come by to make sure she was okay. Chandler told him that his mom and dad had been preparing for a trip up to the family cabin and had left that morning. With everything going on, she'd probably forgotten to call out. Slightly relieved, her coworker left, but kept in touch with Chandler over the weekend to make sure that Krista made it back safe. However, when Krista didn't come to work or call out that Monday or Tuesday, her coworker had a gut feeling that something was wrong and encouraged Chandler to go to the police. When they still hadn't come home by Wednesday, July 7th, Chandler took his advice and filed a missing persons report to the Dane County Sheriff's Office. He advised police that his parents had been driven up to the cabin by a mysterious couple. After leaving the police station, Chandler began desperately reaching out to people by phone and going door to door around his neighborhood, asking everyone if they'd heard from his parents.
Kind of difficult to track them down, so couldn't anyone have like security cameras and stuff like that.
However, no one had seen or heard anything. The next day, July 8th, Chandler's brother Mitchell and his fiancée met police officers at the family cabin to search the premises for Bart and Krista. But instead, they discovered something rather odd.
We probably could get in if you wanted us to. Obviously, there'd be some damage. We'd try to minimize it as best we could. But
Yeah, no, I think that honestly at least makes sense at this point.
Sheriff's office, anybody inside? Announce your presence, make yourselves known.
There were no suitcases or possessions inside the cabin. Surfaces were covered in layers of dust, and it didn't look as if anything had been moved or even touched. It was clear that no one had been inside at any point in the recent past. With nowhere else to turn, police summoned Chandler as well as his girlfriend Kat down to the police station in the hopes of uncovering some more details that would help them locate his missing parents. Kat's demeanor at being taken to the station is very different compared to Chandler's.
Oh my god, you can see me? So I'm not gonna lie, if you hear me burping, I have a very sensitive stomach. Is it true that the back seats are leather just in case people throw up or pee back here? Oh, we're good. Boys are always so monotone, stubborn. Don't want to talk about steel magnolias.
You just call me a suspect.
Oh, we both really like Star Wars.
The following interrogation footage has been analyzed by a qualified team, including a licensed attorney, a licensed clinical psychologist, a former licensed professional counselor, and a licensed professional counselor.
So, Brian Trump, Detective Dane County Sheriff's Office, we spoke yesterday. Yeah, Chandler Halderson. Yep. So, obviously, we're here. We want to talk a little bit about your parents going missing, right, Krista and Bart? Before we get started, just because you're up here, okay, so I'm just going to read you your constitutional rights. Okay, so this is a Dane County issued card that they give us. So I'll just read them to you right off the card, okay?
The detective's decision to read directly from the note card, despite surely having committed the Miranda rights to memory, could be to emphasize to Chandler that being Mirandized is just a formality and nothing he needs to think too hard about. After Chandler has read his Miranda rights, the detectives jump directly into questioning. In missing persons cases especially, it's important that investigators work with a sense of urgency. Each minute that passes makes it less likely that the victims will be found alive. However, not taking the time to develop rapport with someone can lead to their anxiety level remaining high, which would make them more closed off. Taking a few minutes to put someone at ease and try to connect with them can end up saving a lot of time in the long run.
So you reported your parents missing. We got some information from you yesterday. So I guess if you want to start with, let's just go back to last Wednesday. Wednesday. I was with my dad. Yeah, I remember it. It was kind of a bad day. Okay. Why was it a bad day? I tossed the ball, and I smashed the glass. Okay. With the door fell. That set my dad off, and we tried to clean it up. Okay. I don't know about him, but I got injured. But he was mad. He didn't really talk to me too much that day. By the way, a detective at my house said something's happened, and while we were leaving, people were going inside. Is there a warrant for my house? Can they go in?
Officer. Yeah. What are they up to?
I didn't hear that.
What are they up to?
My guess is they want to just ask some more follow-up questions and stuff.
No, they went into the house.
They wouldn't go into the house because they are.
They just went behind it.
Officer Haley just walked pretty much in to the gate, the gate on the outside. She just kind of walked in. I was wondering if everything's okay, because she said something's happened.
Okay.
And we need to go down.
All right. I'll find out what that's about.
Well, has anything bad happened?
Not sure.
It's definitely strange that Chandler would suddenly inquire about a warrant. He looks at the detective with a more stern countenance when asking this question, and makes what appears to be direct and sustained eye contact. While sustained eye contact is more of a sign of dishonesty rather than honesty, and looking away periodically can be due to accessing memories, Chandler's almost constant looking away is atypical behavior and suspicious. Just like how his sustained eye contact is a red flag, the awkward, sustained, almost complete lack of eye contact would raise concerns. Here, his eye contact has nothing to do with trying to look open and honest, and everything to do with seeking out any emotions or clues in the officer's face as he responds. For now, they shift their focus back to getting a timeline for what Chandler did on Thursday, July 1st, the last day he'd seen his parents.
It's Thursday morning. I wake up. I kind of just stay in my room on my phone. Help my mom out getting ready in the morning. She left for work at 7:30.
His hand covers both sides of his face and he rubs his chin. These are typically self-soothing behaviors, which aren't unusual for a situation like this. Most people in Chandler's position would be anxious. The pressure from the rubbing is comforting, and his hand and arm serve as a subconscious barrier between him and the detective he's talking to. Chandler speaks very slowly, even when describing routine activities like helping his mom with chores before work. He appears to be thinking a lot and often stares blankly at the floor, as if in a daze. This is a common symptom of emotional cutoff, which results when a person is under high stress or has experienced a traumatic event. Emotional cutoff is an adaptive response that allows a person to better cope with intense situations without falling apart or having an emotional breakdown. Since Chandler was frequently with his girlfriend Kat since Friday, detectives are interviewing both so they can uncover any inconsistencies between their stories. If their recounts of the past weekend don't match up, the two are going to have a huge problem.
Oh, there's a Pooh Bear? All right, you can play with it if you want to. Don't twist my arm. All right. Oh, it's right over there if you want to. Oh, I can grab it. I want to hit you with the Pooh Bear. Oh, please don't. Thank you. Just hang out for a bit. Please. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Her response to seeing the stuffed animal, then proceeding to cuddling with it on the couch as if she's lounging around her own home, may be indicators of emotional immaturity. When someone doesn't show an appropriate level of concern during an investigation, detectives can interpret this as a red flag. Kat sits alone in the interrogation room for about 20 minutes, looking as if she's battling fatigue. Detectives finally enter, introduce themselves, and make her a generous offer in the hopes she lets her guard down.
So this is George. He's one of my partners. Anthony, the one that you spoke with me yesterday, he's off today, so you get George.
I don't know if you're hungry, buy you 2 cookies.
Is there chocolate?
One has chocolate, one doesn't.
I wish. Are you really? If I eat it, I'll just projectile vomit. Oh, please don't. There's a too emotional also vomit. So.
I know one sprinkles, but you know what? I can put them here if you want it. You want it? That one has chocolate.
This one?
This one.
Oh. I was like...
Be careful on that one.
Kat seems to be in a much softer interrogation room than Chandler. Soft interrogation rooms come from a trauma-informed perspective. When family members, children, or victims of assault need to be questioned by police, they may feel safer doing so in a space that feels comfortable, especially compared to a bare interrogation room. In a regular interrogation room, detectives want the suspect to rely on them to provide comfort, such as compliments, food, cigarettes, attention, rather than the room itself providing comfort.
So, some of it is going to be repeat. I just want to make sure that I'm really understanding everything. So, again, give me your timeline from Thursday. Thursday I worked. That's when Chandler told me, I think it was Thursday, that his parents were going up to the cabin with some friends. So he was going to be at the house with the dogs by himself all weekend. Went to sleep.
Friday morning, I woke up. They had left with the stuff was all set out. I remembered the cast. Alright, so Friday during the day I just played video games, kind of. Yeah, then after work, I believe that was the day Kat came over. After whose work? Kat, she is 5 her work. 5 is her work when she was off. I believe she came over. She, I believe she stayed with me on that couch that night.
Woke up, got ready for work, went to work. We planned that I was going to go over there and spend the night. Just hang out with him and the dogs.
So you went to East Target, you went from Hilldale to East Target?
To East, to my mom's house, to grab the hydrogen peroxide and the Swiffer because Chandler broke the glass of the fireplace and cut his toe, so we wanted to clean that and then clean up the glass and blood.
You've probably noticed that Kat is eating her cookie extremely slowly. This is significant because if you remember, when the detectives first offered Kat the cookies, she told them that she has a chocolate allergy. She claimed that she'll violently throw up if she eats it. However, between the sprinkle cookie and the chocolate chip cookie, she chose the chocolate one. This may explain why she's holding on to it for so long and taking such tiny bites. She could be trying to avoid the chocolate or ingest only little bits of it at a time. You'll later see throughout the interview that she pauses multiple times, reporting the urge to vomit. Her choice to take the chocolate cookie, though, was unusual and could be a possible indication of attention-seeking behaviors.
So then to Chandler's. And then I was there, and then I left in the morning because he wanted to do chores, and then I know around what time I was home. Took a picture. And so on Saturday, I was with my dog at 8:53 a.m. So did you see the fireplace? What did it look like? Like, broken. It was like one pane, I think, on the left side.
And did you see, like, the blood in the glass? Was that all picked up?
It was pretty much all picked up, except, like, a little bit of glass was still there. Honestly, I didn't see, like, a lot of blood, but probably because it was only a cut on his big toe.
Okay.
I see it again.
And blood was by the fireplace, I assume? The blood was by the fireplace?
I think so. I didn't, like, see it, you know?
Oh, you didn't see the blood? Oh.
Honestly, I didn't see, like, a lot of blood, but...
It's Sunday. It's the 4th. In the morning, I'm a little worried about my family. I think I called my mom. Oh, throughout I've called, I don't know the times, though. Throughout the weekend, I mean. But I called my mom, I believe, in the morning or along those lines, and I get a text from her. It was a text message. It wasn't even an iMessage, so I assumed. She said white leg today. So she sent it that day.
Chandler makes notably little eye contact with either officer throughout his explanation of his weekend. Occasionally breaking eye contact is a typical sign of one's attempt to access memories. But Chandler is mostly staring down and away from detectives, only looking up at them every now and then. Also, the way Chandler backtracks here sounds as if he made a mistake by indicating to detectives that he only contacted his mother on July 4th. He felt the need to clarify his statement, a sign that there's something of possible interest here.
I called Dan that Sunday, asked him what he's up to, if he wants to hang out. I don't like being alone at the house very long.
Dan is mom's co-worker / friend?
Yeah, he's this guy. He invited me for fireworks in his driveway. No, this is Sunday. So I went to Kat's house to eat, but we ended up not eating there. We went to Cress's house. Kat and I rushed back to my house, let the girls out, and we go back straight to the farm.
The farm is Cress's home and property. It's a large plot of land that features Cress's house, fields of crops and plants, a big barn, and an above-ground swimming pool that Chandler and Kat frequently use. After enjoying a meal at the farm, the couple traveled back to Chandler's house around 7 p.m. They fed his dogs and took them outside, tackled a couple other small chores. Then they made their way to Dan's house to light fireworks and spend the 4th of July holiday together. After a fireworks show that nearly caused a bushfire, the pair decided it was time to call it a night. They went back to Chandler's house and fell asleep together around 10 p.m. Kat tells investigators much of the same thing about her holiday.
When you say you went home, you went to
Mom's.
Your mom's?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry. Very good. Stomach acid.
Kat corroborates Chandler's story. Kat shows detectives a video of Chandler that's timestamped on July 4th.
And then we left around 6:30 because he had to be home before 8 to feed the dogs their dinner. And so we left around 6:30, probably got to my mom's house.
There's a garbage or a bathroom.
I think I'll look really sus if I stand up and run out of here. I'm not trying to get tackled.
I'm not going to tackle you.
No. You go, you too.
Oh. You're good. Okay.
After enjoying fireworks at Dan's house, then going back to Chandler's for the night, the two woke up together Monday morning. Kat left for work shortly before 8 a.m. Chandler supposedly spent the morning playing video games and watching TV. He then made a rather spontaneous visit to the farm by himself.
Well, at the end of the day on Monday, I did go for the afternoon. I did go to the farm to talk to Chris and Kat's mom. I told them what's happening with my health because I had the appointment at 2.
Did you go to the farm before or after?
After, because I told them what happened to me. And I told them the legs are probably going to be permanent and the headaches should be fixed after the hemorrhage is cleared a little bit.
Chandler is speaking like someone who's trying to jog their memory. He must know that the interrogation isn't some sort of memory test, but he seems keen on recalling every detail, perhaps hoping that providing such detail will mean that he won't be considered a suspect. An innocent person would reasonably want to cough up as much information as possible. However, focusing on details could also be Chandler's way of diffusing any stress or anxiety he's feeling.
Where are we?
Sunday. So you were swimming, having a breakdown. What were you having a breakdown about?
You ever have your legs stretched? Yeah.
No, I haven't. Just...
I don't even know if they're done getting as bad as they can be yet. So yeah, that's not fun.
And I think you were telling me last night it's a symptom of a concussion, right?
So
right?
That's not it. It's a symptom of nerve damage from the hip in my spine. So it's permanent.
Okay, I understand that now better.
Yeah, I go to dinner at Kat's house on the east side.
Okay. What time do you think that was?
It had to be 7:30. I left the farm. I think we just eat and cuddle a little bit.
Okay.
I go home.
So
I'm doing good, so I'll let you keep going.
I really try to remember things. And then Sunday woke up, got ready.
Sunday or Monday?
Monday, sorry. Left around 7:40 because I took a picture at 7:33 of us. Then I went to work. I don't know if you want to see a picture of me at my job because I took a picture in the hazardous section. In the hazardous medication.
So far, Kat comes across as open and forthcoming with detectives. She answers all of their questions in detail and offers up photos and timestamps readily and frequently without being asked. On the other hand, this does all seem a tad convenient. This behavior seems unusual, but may indicate her willingness to be cooperative.
From there, I went to my mom's house because Taylor went to the farm because my mom's fiance lets him walk in the pool because that's one of the things we did Sunday because it helps stretch out his legs, make him feel better. Because I also helped stretch his legs on Friday because he has some tired numbness. That's the word. And from his fall he had a couple weeks back.
From there, Kat's account of Monday night mimics Chandler's. They met up at Kat's mom's house sometime around 8 p.m., ate dinner, and watched TV together. Then Chandler left and they spent the night in their respective homes. We pick our tale back up on Tuesday morning.
Dan is worried about my mom on Tuesday, I think. Did he call? I said no word. My mom, I don't know if he called or texted. I think he just contacted. That's what I can think of. Reached out. Yeah, he reached out. Then I'm like, oh, it's Tuesday morning. They should be here. No worry. I think I called my mom that day.
So from the time they left, did you talk to them at all when they were? I got a text. You got the one text that you mentioned earlier. Didn't like it, right? Yeah. But that was it. Nothing else.
Yeah. So that's fishy to me. Even the text, because I realized Memorial Day is when the White Light Parade is.
Oh, sure.
There's no 4th of July. Maybe there's cheap drinks, but there's no parade at White Lake on the 4th. Then I started trying to get the glass. So I been a little lazy on the glass. I just kind of had chairs in front of it. My blood was kind of on the floor, so I got the Swiffer I borrowed from Kat. I Swiffered the floor, and then I got a little bit in the kitchen. And then everywhere kind of I walked, pretty much. The bathroom, the kitchen, and then I couldn't get the carpet, so I still stained that up real crappy.
While it's possible that the bloody toe and the explanation behind it are all true, traces of blood at a crime scene are always a red flag to law enforcement. They'll likely be checking out these stains in order to gauge whether they really might have come from a cut, or if they were clearly caused by something else. One must wonder if Chandler has ever heard of a Band-Aid.
I just tried to stop all the bleeding, but it wouldn't stop. So
that blood was all coming from your left foot.
Yeah, left foot hole.
Left foot hole.
Yeah.
I mean, are we talking massive amounts of blood, or are we talking, a little bit, like describe?
It started as drops until I got to the bathroom. And then I got back to go grab my sock and some of the paper towel. And I see the glasses in there, so I grab a tweezers and I pull it out. And then it starts squirting out. And I got some, a little bit of the rock. It wasn't that bad of the rock. But I think the worst was that floor. It kind of like this lid puddles. Mm-hmm. It wasn't good.
Are we not on the floor down in the basement?
Well, that one, and then I go upstairs to the kitchen, and it's still going, and I'm trying to get my foot in the sink just to slow it down and pinch it maybe.
Chandler continues with a highly detailed account of his every move. He's sticking to his strategy of providing a description of every single step. However, his constricted emotions and facial expressions make it difficult to read whether this is a symptom of anxiety or a genuine attempt to be helpful.
It's work today for only 30 minutes.
Why only 30?
I was trying.
Okay.
I'm an emotional person.
That's what you're crying about.
My boyfriend's parents are missing. I think it's more concerning if I wasn't concerned. I'm a very emotional person. I cry enough for both of us, is what I like to say.
Sure.
It's I hang out with the family often, There's parents, they're important.
As far as the blood on your foot, how did you clean that up? So we were talking, you had blood on Swiffer Wet Jet. Okay, Swiffer Wet Jet. And where did you get that from?
Kat let me borrow it.
Where's it at now?
I returned it to Kat.
Yeah. Did you use anything else?
Hydrogen peroxide for the tiles from the hard floors. Just the big gloves needed a little bit.
Hydrogen peroxide. Did that seem to help get rid of the blood?
Well, it hurt my foot. That stuff. But it didn't really help. It kind of just made a mess. Well, when I had some blood on the basement, I used the peroxide
Okay. Basement floor and tiles in the kitchen?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I excited. It wasn't as much. Like, there were, like, this size pools in the kitchen.
Okay.
I was pinching it pretty dang hard.
And did you clean up at all when it actually happened?
My dad was furious. So he did stuff
To clean it?
Yeah, I don't know what he did, but he sent me to my room upstairs, and he did whatever he did, but it still was on the floor after he was done.
Okay. Did your dad get injured at all when the glass broke? Did he step on any of
And he sent me up, but I don't doubt it. If he gets mad, he's not thinking.
So we don't know if your dad got hurt?
No.
Okay.
No. But my best guess is that guy reached in the fireplace and cut his arm or something. I don't know. What's up? The head pain? Do you guys have like Tylenol or something? I know you guys can't really offer anything like that, but
Like a headache?
yeah, I've been getting the migraines from all of the hits and stuff.
Most people wouldn't dare to make a joke about their missing loved one being hurt out of fear and concern that they actually could be. Chandler's amusement about his dad getting cut will certainly be noted by detectives as a red flag. To be fair, it's possible that Chandler is just the type of person who uses inappropriate humor to cope with stress or anxiety. However, when it's discovered what lay among the ashes of the Halderson's fireplace, you'll look back on this comment with a bit more speculation.
And then I go to the police station because I ask her, when should I make a thing? I'm sorry. Don't worry, sir.
Wednesday morning, you said you went to the police department.
Yeah, to make talk to him about my parents. And then I met with 3 sheriffs.
Chandler's show of emotion is sudden and brief. The nature of his display calls into question whether he's trying really hard to keep his composure, or whether this short demonstration was merely an affectation. There's also a third theory. Chandler's agitation might not concern his parents' disappearance at all. Chandler was surely trying to say missing persons report, but he couldn't seem to remember what it's called, no matter how hard he tried.
How's Chandler been?
Like I said, he's not really, he expresses it in a different way. He's not like the biggest emotional person, but like, I guess like when I look at him, it's different when other people look at him. Like I can tell it's really hard on him. And like, he just sits there and dissociates and like, paces and like, just sits there like, where are my parents, like a shell.
Kat also told police that Chandler was trying to keep himself optimistic and saying things like, well, they're at the cabin. They don't get a lot of reception, so that's why we haven't talked to them. As well as speculating that maybe their phones died and that was why they haven't heard from them.
So his brother is there today. He leaves.
To go to the cabin?
Yeah, what does Chandler want to do? Does he want to stay in Madison? Does he want to go up to the cabin and help his brother? What's he thinking?
I asked him that when I was on the couch. I was like, why don't we go up to the cabin? Because like his fiance and him were going. He's like, well, I can't drive. I'm like, well, I could have drove. He's like, yeah, you could have. He's like, but I don't know if they need me in Madison for questions, which clearly you guys did. And I also need to be with the dogs. So then I think he went to his neighbors to see if they had like any like a Ring camera and if there's like footage that might have caught the car, and they said they already handed it over to the police. When he came back, and I was in the backyard playing frisbee with the dogs.
Fancy security system. I was wondering if you were able to capture the road or my house.
The police actually came and downloaded everything they have. But it's actually my sister's house.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so they were here, I think till like 9 o'clock last night and downloaded all the video she's got. So we're hoping that...
Yeah, did it capture anything on...
We don't know. They just took a copy of everything, and so we're hoping
wide angle lens.
Yeah, and it's all
Be able to get a color.
Yeah, and it's all HD, and then I think there's one...
especially in the dark. It looks like it has a little bit of night vision.
Yeah, and there's one on the corner of the garage, too.
How was he when he came back from the neighbor's house after checking for the ring?
He was like, I don't know, I guess a little relieved that they had a camera and they already handed it over to the police. Like, he's really concerned about his parents.
He was definitely concerned based on a call he placed to the sheriff's office before his interrogation.
A little confused. I got 2 squads parked right outside my house, and they're not really canvassing, they're just kind of sitting there. Is everything all right?
Yeah, I mean, they're in the area doing canvassing, and they're also probably doing a shift change right now, getting our second shift crew on around 3:30.
Oh, there's 4 now. Something going on that we need to know? Do you know of anything? So, I don't know. It's kind of stressful. Sorry, so there's nothing new going on?
Not that I'm aware of.
All right.
But in addition to his concern was his notable level of apprehension, and the source behind it would soon be uncovered.
Is there any reason to believe mom or dad's blood would be somewhere in the house? Have they been injured at all that you're aware of? Well, my dad scratches his psoriasis till he, gushes blood. Okay. Gushing, describe gushing to me. Enough to run down your leg, cover your leg, I suppose, he has it on his knee. So when he does this, it just drips down. I ask him to stop, but he doesn't do it when he's stressed out. Yeah, he just kind of it's his tick. Probably itches. My mom's blood, just from her bloody noses she gets sometimes when she wakes up. So that's why we've been doing the humidifier and dehumidifiers. Yeah. Probably downstairs you get we have to do multiple of them, but she can't be in the living room too long because that's a dehumidifier. And if she does, her nose gets bad. Not like a regular one, she gets it bad.
We begin to see some variance in Chandler's facial expressions and intonation. He's really dramatizing his description of how his parents' blood could be present in the home. In reality, neither the scratching of the psoriasis nor a nosebleed are enough to produce noticeable pools of blood. He might think he's being helpful and convincing, but he's actually coming off as quite suspicious. The fact that further investigation revealed considerably large traces of blood that had once been on the basement floor inside Chandler's home doesn't help his argument. In fact, it seems as if he might be trying to explain away why there may be a lot of blood found inside his house.
So he has a good relationship with mom and dad.
He's introverted and, doesn't want to hang out with his parents. He'd rather video game on his computer.
It's a good relationship. No problems that you know of between the 3 of them?
I mean, he owed them money, but he paid them back. I told you that already. And that's why I was let over during the weekend. But other than that, that's, the only time I've really seen a big problem with them, I guess.
So how did that come about? Why was that a big deal? Because I thought yesterday you said that he's owed for rent and Christmas presents and stuff like that. So why was it
those 2 weeks?
Yeah.
Because he was working for American Family at the time. And there was problems with HR and how they weren't paying him. And it was they sent it in the mail, sent it to not his address. So he was please cancel that check. Then he tried getting them to deposit it, and then at that point they owed him a couple $1,000s because they were so far behind. And then I guess the company that they sent money through was this doesn't seem legit. They thought it was a scam. And so his parents are you got to give us that money because we know you have money. And so, yeah, then he paid them. And it was just those 2 weeks that were you have strict.
It seems odd that Chandler's parents were instantly critical and not more understanding of the problems he was having getting paid. This indicates that there were probably pre-existing issues concerning Chandler and making excuses to not repay his debts. Bart and Krista simply could have been drawing the line with Chandler rather than being hard on him. It could also be for this reason that they gave Chandler chores and expected him to cook sometimes.
So for the 2 weeks, was that when he hurt his back when he fell?
Yeah, it pretty much started, like, right after he fell. Because, like, they could just say, cat, come over. It was a part of, like, the recovery and, like, hey, pay us back. Like, because he fell downstairs, they just had twice, bruised his ribs, had to wear, like, a neck brace. They were obviously concerned and didn't want him doing a lot.
Do you know when he fell?
Yes, June 17th. Before 1:42, because that's around the time this picture was taken.
He was just going down the stairs and fell?
He was on the phone with his boss who was telling him to hurry up to his computer, so he was running down the wooden stairs with socks.
Yeah. Classic.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you a weird question with him falling. He probably was going on the computer, but any kind of violence in the house? No.
His dad was downstairs at his computer. He was telling me about, like, hearing Chandler fall. He was like, I was on my computer, it didn't sound bad. And then, like, I got up to, like, check after a while, and, like, he was on the floor. And I was like, okay, Mr. Halderson.
Sure.
Yeah.
He hasn't said anything about it afterwards, like, hey, I didn't just slip on my socks, I actually...
No, Chandler's clumsy. Okay, it is not the first time he has fallen. He needs, like, a life alert with things. Yeah. I've seen one of his many falls. Just this. He really likes his socks.
Okay. Socks and long sleeves.
Yeah. It's really cute. It's a good type of weird.
Chandler supposedly ran down the wooden staircase in his home while wearing socks, causing him to slip and fall down the stairs. He sustained a concussion, bruises to his ribs, and nerve damage resulting from a hit to the upper spine. The concussion alone left him with poor memory recall and trouble processing information quickly, among other lasting symptoms. Because his injuries impacted his cognitive ability, Chandler apparently felt that it would be best to notify his soon-to-be bosses at SpaceX of his accident. As a result, he lost his position at the company. This loss, in combination with the persistent and indefinite discomfort of his injuries, weighed heavily on Chandler, not to mention his parents having gone missing not long after. It certainly sounds like an unfortunate case, and while the circumstances surrounding his termination are disheartening, it seems odd that Chandler would voluntarily give up his dream job, seemingly prematurely. If he really did have his future mapped out and it all hinged on this job, most others wouldn't have given up without a fight. However, Chandler essentially just forfeited his future position.
What about Florida? So that's where SpaceX was, that's where he was supposed to go. What was the plan? Go down there? You too? Mm-hmm. Okay. So what did that mean? Because obviously you're a job here, so did you have a job lined up?
Or we're just going to transfer to, I'm not trying to say FU, but like FU, Florida University, because they also have a pharmacy school down there. So I'm getting Facebook notifications because people are reposting the Dane County Sheriff's like notice about them, and we've just been messaging people, and like people have been noticing, they're like, hey, are you guys okay? And we're just like repost or tell people.
Sure.
Yeah. We're first gonna go down there.
Did you guys have like everything lined up? Like when were you supposed to?
She was supposed to leave the Saturday of the fall. So happened on Thursday, Friday. He's supposed to leave Saturday morning. And then I was gonna leave at the end or middle of August because I wanted to be here for my birthday.
Oh, it's a big one.
2000, yeah. Gonna get crunk.
The tragic fall ultimately cost him his job and his future among the palm trees. Perhaps this was just a coincidence, or even a fateful stroke of bad luck. Or maybe the fall is just a small part of something more convoluted. Detectives would discover the truth soon enough.
Did you guys have like a place that you were gonna, like, did you have everything kind of figured out? Where were you gonna stay?
Just like apartment building in Titusville.
Okay. Did he like already sign the lease and stuff?
I think so.
Before Chandler lost his job, she was supposed to be moving down to Florida with him in early August. It's odd that her big move across the country was just around the corner, and she had absolutely no idea what apartment they were moving to, and no confirmation that the arrangements were actually in place.
Hey, Mitch hasn't been in the cabinet in a while, right? Today? Oh, well, today.
Yeah, I couldn't say he's been there. He didn't go last year.
Okay. Does he kind of do his own thing, or?
Mitch hasn't lived with us, or, you know, like, he's got a family now, a dog, a girlfriend, no kids, but cool. He's kind of, you know, outside time. You know how it is with brothers. Yeah, he's still the coop.
Got a feeling myself.
Yeah.
Alright.
I've started thinking about that myself, and my parents are trying to figure that out with me.
Mm-hmm.
It's normal for a young person to receive help and guidance from their parents, but Chandler sounds more like he needs his parents to hold his hand, which is indicative of severe emotional immaturity. Although many young adults may live at home for a time, they should be working towards financial independence. When someone is happy to mooch off of their parents or another person with no long-term goals for themselves, this can be a red flag. In fact, living a parasitic lifestyle can be a sign of psychopathy. Another sign of Chandler's immaturity was that following his parents' disappearance, it was noted that all the couches in the basement were pushed together, and when he was asked why, Chandler said that he had made himself a fort to sleep in.
Randall, you ever heard about that? They got all the background, I think, right? Yeah, I think so. So, I think it's time we start talking about what happened to your parents. Like the truthful version. Okay. So, we have like 20 pages of writing. We're going to start with a clean, white piece of paper for you to start telling the truth. Okay? Because listen to me.
Confronted with a change in the detective's tactics, Chandler immediately sits up and leans away from the detectives. The detective's choice to cut Chandler off before he could say anything is actually a move taken straight from the Reed technique. In this style of interrogation, the detectives are advised to immediately cut off any attempts to lie, so as not to allow the suspect to entrench themselves in that lie. In this case, detectives knew Chandler's first instinct would be to try to scramble his way out of this and quickly shut him down.
Is he being interviewed too, or is he done?
Honestly, I'm with you, so I don't know. You have my attention. So there you go. There you go.
With all this questioning, Kat must be adding things up and possibly realizing that Chandler may be a suspect. If she isn't concerned by now, she definitely should be.
This is the only chance you're going to have to tell us the truth. Okay. Listen. I can't tell you what we know, but we know you're not telling us the truth. We know your parents are no longer with us. Okay, and we know the reason why.
Chandler appeared taken aback by the detective's statement that his parents were no longer alive. This is less likely shock at finding out that his parents are dead, and more likely the realization that the jig is up. Officers actually do have proof of his involvement in what really happened to Bart and Krista. Unfortunately, the clues that police managed to dig up tell a morbid tale of the happy couple's last moments. Chandler isn't the only one under suspicion. After all, Kat was with him frequently throughout the weekend. If detectives were also able to find proof of Kat's involvement, she might have a similar conversation waiting around the corner for her. One reason the investigators may be suspicious of her is that while Kat's mother Dolce was a trainee at a public safety commission, she was overheard talking on the phone to her daughter. The instructors at the event claimed that they heard Dolce say to Kat, "But you were not home that night." It's unclear exactly which night they were referring to, but the instructors alleged that they may have heard Kat reply something along the lines of, "Just tell them I was home last night." Thinking this was odd, the instructors asked Dolce what was going on, and she repeatedly told them she was home, she was home. It's important to note that it can't be confirmed what was actually said on the phone call. Still, the instructors told the police what they believed they had overheard. Let's check back in on Kat's interview.
We've been at the house during the renovations. So there's a lot going on at the house. What does the smell like in the house?
Dog.
Okay.
Like when they were working on the basement walls, you could like kind of smell the dusty smell. There's a fiery smell on Friday because when he broke the glass thing on the fireplace, like ash was like exposed. Yeah.
Okay.
The pungent smell of fire is an important observation, as it indicates that the fireplace was actually used not long before she was there.
Does Chandler talk about any firearms that he has?
His friend did gift him one.
Okay. What is it?
I don't know what it's called. But other than that, his parents, they have like a safe with other guns. Because he used to be on the shooting team in college.
Okay, you need to tell the truth. Listen. You need to tell the truth about what happened, and just tell us why it happened. Okay? If something happened, if you were defending yourself, or if you just got fed up with stuff, you need to tell us the truth. Okay?
Chandler exhibits a significant amount of anchor point shifting here, indicating that the detective's pressure is starting to make him feel anxious. This is an important cue to the detectives that if they keep pushing, he may get to a point where he will open up and be honest soon.
This is your chance to tell us why. Okay? I'm not BSing you. Okay? So can we do that?
Okay. Lawyer.
I'm sorry.
Say it again, lawyer.
Yeah, because they're lawyer.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
Chandler has clearly just invoked his right to counsel. The questioning at this point needs to stop. He seems to have resorted to asking for counsel because he was being confronted with evidence contrary to his statements.
So how did you find out that the parents were not, that they were late? Did he tell you?
Yeah, we text like all the time, or Snapchat all the time, not really text, both. And I was like, hey, like, have you heard from them? He's like, no, not yet. I'm like, okay, well, has Mitch heard from them? He's like, I don't know. I'm like, okay, well, you should maybe ask Mitch. He's like, I don't want to make him worry. And I'm like, well, even just ask, like, hey, his mom sent you pictures of the cabin or anything. And I'm like, Tuesday, it was like, still haven't heard anything? He was like, yeah, no, I'm going to go to the police tomorrow. Then he went to the police on Wednesday.
You've been trying to call them?
Yeah, he tried to call them. Like, he called his mom in front of me at one point and went straight to voicemail.
Do you know what day that was? Just sometime this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Kat tries numerous times to present Chandler in a favorable light. She mentions that it was his idea to call the police and that he tried calling his mom in front of her. Despite the type of questions she's being asked about him, she seems to be standing by his side, even at the point where the detective's questions are getting more intense and implying foul play on Chandler's part. But unbeknownst to her, detectives are already on his tail.
Exactly what happened. Okay, you know what happened. We're not going to tell you what happened. You know what happened. You were there when it happened. We're not BSing you, okay?
I wasn't there when it happened.
We know more than you think we know.
Actually,
There's people that have told us things. We have evidence, we have proof. We have more to say about that. So your parents never made it to the cabin, and I think you know that. Okay, so you're asking for an attorney. We're not going to ask any more questions. Okay.
instead of stand up and just put it over here for me. Get any in your pockets at all. Wallet. Just a wallet that just put in there. Hey, okay. Just take this.
Despite the interrogation ending, Chandler still had something disturbing to say after he was handcuffed. He told the officer escorting him from the room that, quote, "You don't know the whole story," and that he didn't feel bad about what I did. When the officer asked what he meant by that, he didn't respond.
You don't think he had anything to do with his mom and dad being unheard from?
No. No. All my friends I've talked to, they're like, no, not Chandler, no. Like, that'd be crazy. Sorry, I sound very monotone right now, but like, just no.
Kat appears to have no doubt of her boyfriend's innocence, but maybe she just doesn't know him as well as she thinks she does. In the weeks following this interview, Chandler's darkest secrets would come to light. Secrets pertaining to more than just his parents' disappearance. But for now, detectives must get to the bottom of what happened to Bart and Krista, and quickly.
And his brother Mitchell, you think?
Mitchell?
Yeah, he's
a leaf in the wind.
okay.
Even if he tried, they could just like push him over and he'd like break.
Kat immediately furrowed her brow when detectives asked her if she thinks Chandler had some role in his parents' death, indicating stress and discomfort with the question. After all, compare that reaction to her reaction when she was asked about Mitch. Rather than furrowing, her eyebrows raised, which generally indicates surprise. She even seems amused by the suggestion. It's so unbelievable to her. She also keeps repeating no when they suggest Chandler's involvement. It can often be interpreted as a red flag when someone repeats something over and over, as repetition can be a way to build credibility. However, in this case, Kat may be responding to her own inner dialogue. The thoughts that must be running through her head are unfathomable, and it's almost like she's trying to convince herself that there's no way he could be capable of that.
When you get your farm this weekend, was you guys at school the whole time, or is he walking around the property at all?
I mean, we went on walks together, but walking's hard for him.
Sure.
It's not like he could run away and I wouldn't see him. But we were at each other the whole time. On Monday, he said he walked off by himself, but he was going to cry, so.
On Monday, he walked off by himself? Had a little cry?
Yeah, a little cry session.
Why was he upset about it? If Mom had texted him on Sunday saying that...
The job thing still.
Oh, the job thing?
Yeah.
When did he find out about the job? Was that Monday?
Yes. Because it was right after his appointment. Because they like called him. HR did.
Okay. So, were you on the phone with Chandler and heard him yelling about being treated like a prisoner at his house?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, tell me more about that.
When he wasn't allowed to leave.
And that was after the fall, right? When he was recovery / payback 2 weeks for the money that he owes them.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
What day was that?
Are you still talking about being a prisoner? I don't know.
No. Like recently?
It just sounds familiar.
Is that something that he normally complained about?
Yeah, like he's only allowed to leave when his parents let him leave. Like their house, their rules. Like if they wanted him home, they'd be like, no, you can't go.
Everything about Kat's answer, the long pause before speaking, the glances around the room, and the vague answer are all red flags for signs of anxiety or concern. She seems uncomfortable and reluctant to speak negatively of him. However, she might also be glancing around because it's likely that Kat has many conversations with Chandler, so she's not always going to recall exactly when each conversation took place. Additionally, the fact that she can't remember what day the conversation occurred could be an indication that this sort of situation happens often. In text messages between Chandler and Kat, it's clear that he felt his parents were overbearing. In one, Chandler tells Kat he told his mom, "I won't be your prisoner anymore," and that, quote, "she's actually trying to jail me when she knows I can be more comfortable somewhere else." In one instance, Chandler told Kat that she can't come over, and he can't leave the house because he owes his parents $1,200. When Kat offers to Venmo him the money, he says he can't take it because his parents see the transactions. The next day, Chandler tells her that he's still on lockdown, and Kat replies that she doesn't understand why his parents are being weird and selective on when she can see him. In an even more concerning series of messages, Chandler tells Kat that his mom wants him to go to the cabin, but he's going to tell her he has plans with Kat.
Unraveling a Web of Lies. The Criminal Psychology of Chandler Halderson. Introduction. In July 2021, a seemingly ordinary missing persons report in Wisconsin led investigators to uncover an almost unbelievable crime. 23-year-old Chandler Halderson had reported his parents, Bart and Krista Halderson, missing from their home in Windsor, Wisconsin. abcnews.go.com. At first glance, Chandler appeared to be a concerned son from a loving middle-class family. He described an idyllic life. He was a hard-working college student, a prospective SpaceX employee, a police scuba dive team member, and an insurance company intern, an overachiever with a bright future. His parents were proud of his accomplishments and supported him as he pursued his dreams. Yet behind this carefully constructed facade lay a dark tapestry of deception and psychopathology. As investigators would soon learn, virtually none of Chandler's supposed achievements were real. In reality, Chandler was leading a parasitic lifestyle, unemployed and living off his parents, while weaving an elaborate web of lies to maintain a false image. Oxygen.com, psychologytoday.com. When Chandler's lies began to unravel and his parents started to discover the truth, his response was as shocking as it was brutal. He murdered both of them in cold blood. He then dismembered their bodies and scattered the remains across the Wisconsin countryside in a desperate attempt to hide his crimes. Oxygen.com. In the aftermath, Chandler pretended nothing was wrong, going about his daily routine, socializing with his girlfriend, and even contacting police to help find his missing parents. It was a performance that initially fooled many, but investigators soon noticed red flags in his behavior and story. This case presents a chilling study in criminal psychology. Chandler Halderson's actions and demeanor offer insight into the mind of a young man who would do anything to protect his ego and lies, even commit parricide, the killing of one's parents. In this detailed analysis, we will examine the psychological aspects of Chandler's behavior before, during, and after the crime. We will explore how his personality traits, including pathological lying, manipulation, immaturity, and lack of empathy, fit patterns often seen in psychopathic or narcissistic individuals. We will analyze his conduct during the cover-up and police interrogation, highlighting the behavioral red flags that ultimately exposed his guilt. Chandler's interactions with those around him, especially his girlfriend Catherine "Kat" Melander, also shed light on his manipulative tendencies and superficial charm. Finally, we will consider how the justice system and mental health experts viewed Chandler's psyche, with prosecutors labeling him a calculating sociopath who spun an amazing web of lies and showed no remorse. Oxygen.com. By dissecting Chandler Halderson's criminal psychology in depth, we gain a better understanding of what drove an ordinary-looking young man to commit such extraordinary brutality. His case is a stark reminder that beneath a perfect facade may lurk dangerous psychological forces. The following analysis draws on interrogation transcripts, witness reports, trial evidence, and established psychological frameworks to provide a comprehensive portrait of Chandler's mind and behavior. In doing so, it illustrates key warning signs of a pathological liar and family killer, and how those signs were eventually recognized, bringing his deception to an end. This analysis contains explicit details of violence that some readers may find disturbing. The perfect facade, a life built on lies. To understand Chandler Halderson's psychological behavior, we must first understand the elaborate facade he constructed. By all outward accounts, Chandler appeared to be a successful and driven young man. He lived at home with his parents while supposedly pursuing an IT degree at Madison Area Technical College and working remotely for an insurance company. He boasted of being on a police search and dive team and claimed he had a job lined up at Elon Musk's SpaceX in Florida upon graduation. Oxygen.com. He even told friends and family that he and his long-term girlfriend, Catherine "Kat" Melander, would soon move to Florida to start their new life with his prestigious job. Chandler was described as personable and popular. He had been an Eagle Scout and was known for his sense of humor and charm in high school and college. In short, he seemed like a classic overachiever, the kind of son any parent would be proud of. However, nothing about Chandler's purported accomplishments was real. In truth, Chandler had dropped out of college after a single semester in 2018 in .wikipedia.org. Unbeknownst to anyone, he had stopped attending classes entirely over a year before the murders. He was not employed at the insurance company as he claimed, and there was no job at SpaceX waiting for him. He had never actually secured such a position. The various impressive roles he described, college student, insurance intern, rescue diver, future SpaceX engineer, were pure fabrications designed to inflate his image. Chandler had carefully crafted these lies over months and years, fooling even those closest to him. Chandler's deception extended even into official channels. For example, he created fake email accounts impersonating college officials to communicate with his parents about his schooling abcnews.go.com. When Bart and Krista pressed him about why they hadn't seen any official college transcripts or why tuition bills were irregular, Chandler would forward them emails from supposed school staff explaining administrative mix-ups. In reality, Chandler himself was writing those emails. A Dane County detective later confirmed that some of the email accounts supposedly belonging to school employees were traced back to Chandler's phone number and birth date, revealing that he had been impersonating school staff to allay his parents' suspicions and .wikipedia.org. He even posed as a college advisor over the phone. At one point, Bart Halderson received a call from someone named Daniel regarding a meeting, but Bart remarked afterward that the caller sounded exactly like Chandler. A result, it turned out, of Chandler using a voice-changing app to mimic another person's voice, abcnews.go.com, abcnews.go.com. These extraordinary measures illustrate the lengths Chandler went to maintain his lies. Chandler's pathological lying was not limited to his parents. Friends, acquaintances, and even strangers were taken in by his stories. He lied to his girlfriend Kat about virtually everything, from his daily activities to his future plans. He lied to friends about having multiple girlfriends. One close friend, Alex Gravatt, recounted that Chandler, whom friends called Chaz, would brag about hooking up with other women behind Kat's back cbsnews.com. When Kat confronted him about suspected cheating, Chandler flatly denied it and became more secretive, eventually moving back to his parents' home, possibly because living with roommates made it harder to hide his double life cbsnews.com. He lied to employers as well. At one point, he interned at American Family Insurance, but he deceived them about his college enrollment and eventually had pay issues due to giving incorrect information, which then led to conflict with his parents when they demanded he hand over money he claimed to have earned oxygen.com. Chandler even lied about health issues. In June 2021, he claimed he fell down the stairs and suffered a severe concussion and nerve damage, requiring use of a neck brace and limiting his mobility. While a fall did occur, evidence suggests Chandler may have exaggerated or leveraged the injury to gain sympathy and postpone any immediate expectations, such as moving to Florida for the SpaceX job, which he conveniently lost due to the injury. This pattern telling falsehoods to avoid responsibility or to present a grandiose self-image is a hallmark of antisocial and narcissistic personalities. In fact, pathological lying and conning manipulative behavior are key traits on the Hare psychopathy checklist, a standard diagnostic tool for psychopathic tendencies psychology, today.com, psychologytoday.com. Beneath his charming surface, Chandler displayed other warning signs. He showed a lack of realistic long-term goals and a parasitic lifestyle, two more traits often associated with psychopathy psychology, today.com. Rather than genuinely working towards a career or education, he concocted fantasies and sponged off his parents. He had no steady job or income of his own, yet he enjoyed the comforts of home without contributing. His parents, Bart and Krista, were by all accounts loving and supportive, but they also expected their adult son to be productive and honest. They allowed him to live at home rent-free as long as he was in school or working towards a goal, and they occasionally asked him to help with chores or bills. For instance, they had him pay a modest rent or repay some money at times. Oxygen.com. Chandler's response to these normal expectations was resentment. In private messages to Kat, he complained that his parents were trying to jail him in his own home and that they treated him like a prisoner whenever he didn't do exactly as they said. He painted himself as a victim of overbearing parents whenever they asserted normal boundaries. For example, Chandler told Kat that he wasn't allowed to leave the house for a period in early June 2021, supposedly because he owed his parents about $1,200, money they had fronted him or expected him to save from his internship, and they wanted him to stay home until it was repaid. Kat offered to lend him the money, but Chandler refused, saying his parents monitored his bank transactions. In texts, he dramatized the situation, writing things like, "I won't be your prisoner anymore" to his mother, and warning Kat he might harm himself out of frustration. abcnews.go.com, abcnews.go.com. This illustrates Chandler's immaturity and deflection of blame. Rather than take responsibility for his debts or discuss issues calmly, he framed his parents as tyrants to gain sympathy from his girlfriend. Chandler's self-victimization and incessant lying suggest a psychological profile fueled by narcissism and possibly other personality disorder features. He seemed to crave the appearance of success without the effort and would lie at all costs to preserve that image. The idea of being seen as a failure or a liar was seemingly intolerable to him, which is why he was so desperate to keep the charade going. This desperation set the stage for the horrific crime to come. As Dane County Detective Sabrina Sims later observed, he just lied to everybody, and it was in those lies that police believed they found the motive for murder. CBSNews.com. Chandler's entire identity was built on a foundation of deceit, and when cracks began to appear in that foundation, his solution was not to come clean, but to eliminate the people who might expose him. Cracks in the facade, pressure, and confrontation. By the summer of 2021, Chandler's lies were growing untenable. His parents, Bart and Krista, had been patiently supporting him under the belief that he was finishing college and preparing for a move to Florida. But a series of odd incidents and inconsistencies aroused their suspicion. For one, despite claiming he was about to graduate, Chandler never produced a diploma or even an unofficial transcript. He always had excuses for why the paperwork hadn't arrived. He also wasn't earning any money despite an alleged full-time internship. An internship that supposedly had pay problems because of a clerical error. Bart, an accountant by profession and a practical man, found this fishy. In June 2021, Bart began pressing Chandler more firmly to show proof of his college enrollment and employment. According to trial evidence, Bart even emailed his son insisting that the runaround with the internship pay doesn't make sense unless Chandler was withholding something. abcnews.go.com. He urged Chandler to be honest if there was an issue, but Chandler continued the ruse. Matters came to a head in late June when Bart decided to verify his son's claims directly. Unbeknownst to Chandler, Bart phoned Madison Area Technical College pretending to be his son, requesting a transcript. abcnews.go.com. The answer he got was devastating. The registrar's office told him Chandler was not enrolled at the college. He had indeed dropped out long ago. This confirmed Bart's worst fear, that his son had been lying about school for years. Bart didn't immediately explode or confront Chandler in anger. Instead, he arranged a meeting at the college with Chandler and some school officials for July 1st, 2021, likely hoping the in-person encounter would force the truth into the open or allow them to sort out what went wrong. Bart and Krista also scheduled a family meeting with Chandler for that evening to discuss his future, finances, and the path forward. Since by then, it was clear something was very wrong with Chandler's story. abcnews.go.com. For Chandler, this was the moment his elaborate house of cards would collapse. We can only speculate on his exact mental state upon learning that his father had called the college. What is certain is that Chandler knew by July 1st that his parents were on the verge of discovering the full scope of his deceit, his fake college career, fake jobs, fake future plans. Everything he had been pretending to be was about to be stripped away, leaving him exposed as a liar. The prospect of facing his parents' disappointment, anger, and likely withdrawal of support was more than Chandler's ego could handle. He likely also feared losing his girlfriend Kat once the truth came out. After all, he had promised her an exciting life in Florida and had been her primary source of information about his own accomplishments. If Bart and Krista confronted him, the truth would ripple out to everyone. This kind of scenario, an impending exposure or humiliation, is a known trigger for extreme violence in certain individuals. Criminologists note that some murders, especially family murders, occur when the perpetrator experiences what is called a narcissistic injury or a catastrophic loss of status in their own mind. Rather than face shame or consequences, the individual lashes out with violence to eliminate the source of their shame. A classic example is family annihilator John List, who in 1971 killed his entire family when he was about to be exposed for financial failures. In his mind, death was preferable to shame. Chandler Halderson's case is a similar dynamic, albeit he targeted his parents rather than children or spouse. When confronted with the collapse of his grandiose false identity, something that threatened his self-worth and his comfortable parasitic lifestyle, Chandler chose to annihilate the threat, in this case his parents. As Deputy District Attorney William Brown later put it, when faced with, in the grand scheme of things, a minor inconvenience in his life, Mr. Halderson chose to commit first-degree homicide 2 times oxygen.com. To any rational outside observer, being caught lying about college is hardly a problem worth killing over. It is a relatively minor inconvenience that could be remedied by coming clean and finding a new path. But to Chandler, the exposure of his lies was an existential threat. On the morning of Thursday, July 1st, 2021, Chandler set his lethal plan in motion. He stalled his father from leaving for the college meeting, likely by inventing some excuse or insisting they handle it later. Sometime that afternoon, Chandler shot his father Bart in the back with a high-powered rifle while Bart was working at the computer in their home in .wikipedia.org. This was no spontaneous scuffle or accident. It was a deliberate killing. The weapon, a rifle Chandler had received as a gift from a family friend, was used at close range on an unsuspecting victim, indicating premeditation and ambush. Chandler likely chose a moment when his father's back was turned, perhaps to avoid confrontation and ensure Bart couldn't resist. Bart Halderson, 50, died from that gunshot wound to his torso and neck area. The medical examiner later determined he had been shot at least twice, including once in the back. ABC News, Go.com. Chandler's mother, 53-year-old Krista Halderson, was at work that day and returned home in the evening, unaware of the horror awaiting her. We can only imagine Krista's shock or confusion when she came home. Perhaps Chandler initially pretended everything was normal, or perhaps Bart's body was concealed by that point. What we do know is that Chandler murdered his mother as well, sometime on the evening of July 1st. The exact method is less clear because, tragically, very little of Krista's body was recovered. The evidence suggests she likely also suffered a violent death, possibly by gunshot or blunt force. But Chandler managed to destroy or hide much of the evidence of her exact cause of death in .wikipedia.org and .wikipedia.org. What is clear is that by that night, both Bart and Krista were dead at the hands of their son. The psychological implications of these acts are profound. Chandler was able to overcome the strongest natural inhibitions, those that normally prevent a person from killing their own parents, people he had lived with and loved for 23 years, in service of protecting his lies. This indicates an extreme lack of empathy and emotional attachment. Family bonds that would deter most individuals meant little when they conflicted with Chandler's self-preservation. His behavior aligns with that of a psychopath, for whom other people, even family, are often seen as objects or obstacles rather than loved ones. Psychopaths can be entirely callous and unemotional when it suits their goal. Psychology, Today.com, PsychologyToday.com. Indeed, one relative later noted that Chandler did not seem to grieve or mourn his parents even for a moment after they vanished. Oxygen.com. It is also notable that Chandler's solution was not to flee or harm himself, but specifically to eliminate the witnesses to his lies. He did not turn the gun on himself in shame, as some family annihilators do. Instead, he chose a self-serving path that allowed him to continue his deceptions. This suggests a cold, calculating mindset rather than a momentary loss of sanity or a crime of passion. In forensic psychology, murders that involve dismemberment and elaborate cover-ups are strongly indicative of a planned, controlled offender, not someone in a blind rage. There was also a clear instrumental purpose. By killing Bart and Krista, Chandler removed the two people who knew him best and were on the verge of unmasking him. It's likely he believed that without his parents in the picture, he could at least delay or mitigate the fallout of his lies, perhaps concoct a story that they went missing, which he did, and thereby avoid immediate exposure of his frauds. It's a perverse logic, but consistent with a mind that prioritizes self-image and avoidance of consequences above all else. In sum, the confrontation with the truth was the stress fracture that caused Chandler's carefully maintained facade to shatter. Under that pressure, his true nature emerged. An individual so consumed by deceit and entitled to his fantasy life that he would commit the ultimate betrayal. The transition from chronic liar to murderer is a drastic escalation, yet in Chandler's mind it might have felt like the only escape from an unbearable situation. The next phase of his behavior, what he did after the killings, provides even more insight into his psychology as he undertook a complex cover-up with a disturbing level of composure and foresight. The gruesome crime and dismemberment. The homicide of Bart and Krista Halderson was just the beginning of Chandler's criminal actions. What he did immediately afterward demonstrated a chilling degree of composure and pragmatism in the face of extreme gore, further highlighting his psychological abnormality. Rather than reacting with horror or regret at what he had done, Chandler set about the gruesome task of dismembering his parents' bodies. This was presumably done to make the remains easier to hide or destroy, and to delay identification and detection of the crime. The very act of cutting apart the bodies of one's own mother and father is almost beyond comprehension for the average person. It requires emotional detachment and a level of comfort with violence that strongly suggests a blunting of normal affective responses, another sign associated with psychopathy psychology, today.com. Investigators later found extensive evidence of what occurred in the Halderson home on July 1st and 2. In the fireplace of the house, over 200 bone fragments and human tissue remains were recovered, indicating that Chandler attempted to burn parts of the bodies right there in the fireplace. Oxygen.com. Among the ashes, authorities discovered fragments of a human skull and facial bones, later confirmed to belong to Bart or Krista. Oxygen.com. This suggests that Chandler tried to destroy evidence by incinerating body parts, possibly the heads or other identifiable parts, in his own living room. Neighbors reported that on the night of July 1st, they smelled an odd odor like burning flesh or barbecued meat coming from the Halderson residence, and one neighbor's security camera caught a flickering light in the Haldersons' windows from around midnight until 4:30 a.m. on July 2nd. YouTube.com, Fox6now.com. These observations are consistent with someone stoking a fire for hours. The sheer persistence required to reduce body parts to fragments in a small household fireplace is astonishing. It shows that Chandler was methodical and determined even after committing murder. He worked through the night, overcoming the natural revulsion one would expect in handling corpses, especially those of loved ones. This is a strong indication of emotional cutoff or dissociation. Chandler may have psychologically switched off his empathy and disgust to perform these tasks, treating the bodies as objects to be disposed of rather than as his parents. What could enable someone to do this? One possibility is that Chandler compartmentalized the reality of his actions. He might have viewed the dismemberment in a purely utilitarian way, a problem to be solved to protect himself. Individuals with antisocial personality traits often lack the physical and emotional response, such as nausea, panic, or sorrow, that normal people would experience in such a scenario. Instead, they can approach gruesome tasks with a cool, business-like attitude. Indeed, prosecutors later argued that over the course of several days, Chandler chose to cut up those people's bodies and spread them around the state as part of a calculated plan. Oxygen.com. The deputy DA emphasized how extraordinary this behavior was, highlighting that normal people can hardly fathom it. "I don't know how you protect the public from someone like that. As long as he breathes, he will be a risk." Oxygen.com. This statement underscores that the dismemberment indicated a deeply dangerous individual who lacks the moral restraint and emotional capacity that keep most people from violence. In addition to burning some remains in the fireplace, Chandler took other steps to hide the evidence. He procured large chunks of ice from local stores on July 1st and 3news.yahoo.com, likely to preserve parts of the bodies while he figured out where to dump them. Investigators suspect that he stored body parts in freezers or coolers for a short time to slow decomposition and odor. Over the next few days, Chandler scattered his parents' remains in multiple locations. He dumped Bart's torso in a rural area of Cottage Grove, about 20 miles from the family home. CBSNews.com, CBSNews.com. This location happened to be near a property owned by the family of Chandler's girlfriend, a farm owned by Kat Mellender's mother's partner. Chandler likely chose it because he was familiar with the area and perhaps thought it would not arouse his girlfriend's suspicion if he went there. In that same area, he hid various tools he had used during the dismemberment. Police later found an old oil drum on the farm that contained a bloody handsaw, a pair of scissors, pruning shears, and bolt cutters, all with human remains or DNA on them. CBSNews.com. The presence of these tools indicates how mechanical and prepared Chandler was. He gathered cutting instruments from around the house, or purchased them, and systematically used them to disarticulate his parents' bodies. The variety of tools also suggests he improvised when some proved ineffective. For example, the bow saw was found broken, indicating the difficulty he encountered in sawing through bone. CBSNews.com. Chandler also disposed of some remains by the Wisconsin River, another location he knew well. On July 3rd, just 2 days after the murders, Chandler drove to a remote stretch of the Wisconsin River in Roxbury, Wisconsin, a spot where he often went to swim or kayak. Thanks to a crucial piece of digital evidence, more on that in the next section, police later discovered human remains belonging to Chandler Halderson near that riverbank n.wikipedia.org. Specifically, they found dismembered human legs that were identified via DNA as Krista's n.wikipedia.org. Those were the only substantial parts of her body ever recovered. The rest of her remains were likely burned to ash in the fireplace or potentially thrown into the river or other locations. Because only her legs were found, the medical examiner could not determine her cause of death n.wikipedia.org, a fact that speaks to the thoroughness with which Chandler attempted to obliterate evidence. Destroying or scattering a body so extensively that the cause of death is unknowable is often a criminal's attempt to avoid a murder charge. If no cause can be proven, they might hope to suggest an accidental or natural death. However, in Chandler's case, the dismemberment itself was proof of homicidal intent, since no natural death would result in such post-mortem mutilation. One detail that emerged later is quite telling. When burning remains in the fireplace, Chandler shattered the glass fireplace doors. Investigators believe the high heat of the sustained fire or some force used during the burning caused the tempered glass pane to crack or break. Chandler, always one to think on his feet with lies, subsequently created a cover story for this damage, and in doing so, inadvertently revealed more of his criminal mindset. He told his girlfriend and later the police that on July 1st he had an accident where he was playing with the family dog and tossed a ball that broke the glass of the fireplace, and in cleaning up the shards he cut his foot badly, leaving blood around the house. This story served multiple purposes for Chandler. It explained the broken glass, and it pre-explained any blood droplets or smears investigators might find in the home. He even demonstrated a superficial wound on his toe to support the tale, claiming he had bled profusely from it. Chandler insisted that he and his father had cleaned up the blood together, and that the only blood in the house would be from that minor injury. In truth, the blood found in the house, such as on the basement floor and in the bathroom, was far too much to be from a toe cut. It was later determined to be from the murders, likely where he temporarily stored or dismembered the bodies, abcnews.go.com. Chandler's premeditated excuse-making is remarkable. Even in the immediate aftermath of killing his parents, he was concocting alibis and alternative explanations for evidence. This again shows a calculating mind at work rather than someone who panicked and lost control. He anticipated investigators' questions about broken glass and bloodstains and had answers ready. Such foresight amid chaos points to a cold, organized thought process. Psychologically, Chandler's actions in this phase demonstrate an absence of remorse and an overwhelming focus on self-preservation. At no point, as far as evidence shows, did he consider turning himself in or even stopping the cover-up. Instead, he doubled down. The dismemberment and dispersal of remains took place over the course of several days, July 1st through July 5th, based on when parts were burned versus dumped. During this period, Chandler was living in the house with the bodies, or parts of them, and with the visual and olfactory reminders of what he'd done. The average person would likely break down emotionally or behave erratically under such ghastly circumstances, but Chandler carried on with striking normalcy externally. A neighbor observed him on July 2nd doing yard work outside, as if nothing were amiss, abcnews.go.com. He texted relatives that weekend with casual updates, saying his parents were out of town and he was home taking care of the dogs. He invited his girlfriend to stay over and even cooked meals with her, all while evidence of his crime was still present in the house. For instance, investigators believe he stored some remains in the family's deep freezer for a couple of days. Plus, the lingering smell of bleach and smoke was noted later. That Chandler could compartmentalize so effectively, appearing calm and ordinary around others, while in the middle of such a horrific personal situation, suggests a level of emotional detachment that is far from normal. It aligns with the notion that he may have psychopathic traits. superficial charm, and the ability to act normal even when committing monstrous acts are well documented in psychopathic criminal psychology. Today.com, psychologytoday.com. In summary, the way Chandler carried out and attempted to cover up the murders is a key window into his psyche. The methodical dismemberment, the pragmatic disposal of evidence, the creation of cover stories in real time, and the lack of visible distress all indicate a personality that is cold, calculating, and devoid of empathy. While many murder cases involve impulsive rage or immediately apparent motives, this one stands out for its sheer inhumanity. Chandler treated his parents' remains like trash to be burned or dumped, all for the sake of concealing a lie. It is this gruesome thoroughness that later led the judge to remark that Chandler would only ever return to society in the privileged circumstance of a burial he denied his parents. Oxygen.com. Before that reckoning in court, however, Chandler continued his charade, acting the part of the worried son and employing psychological manipulation on those around him to deflect suspicion. The next sections will explore how those behaviors manifested and ultimately failed. The cover-up. Deception in action. After committing the murders and initiating the cover-up, Chandler immediately began setting the stage for an alternate reality in which he was innocent and his parents had simply gone missing. This phase of his behavior is critical to analyze, as it shows how Chandler's deceptive tendencies and manipulative skills were put into practice under extreme pressure. A killer with less composure or intellect might have fled or concocted a weak story, but Chandler's approach was more cunning. He sought to control the narrative from the very beginning, inserting himself as a concerned son who had no idea what befell his parents. This required careful planning and strong nerves, as he had to interact with neighbors, friends, and eventually police, all while maintaining his lies. Chandler's cover-up story was that Bart and Krista had left early on the morning of Friday, July 2nd, for a holiday weekend trip to their cabin in Langlade County, Wisconsin, about 3 hours north, in the company of another couple, and that his parents never returned. He claimed they departed before dawn while he was still asleep, and that over the next few days he communicated with them sporadically by text until their phones went silent. This story was designed to give a benign explanation for their absence and to cast Chandler as a worried bystander. However, even at face value, it had some holes and investigators quickly noticed inconsistencies. For one, Bart and Krista's vehicles were both still in the garage, which begged the question, if they went on a trip, how did they travel? Chandler improvised that the unknown couple drove his parents up north. abcnews.go.com. He was hazy on the couple's identity, providing only first names that turned out to be fictional when police tried to trace them. Another immediate red flag was that when police checked the family's cabin, with Chandler's brother who met them there, they found no sign that anyone had been there recently. The cabin was dusty, undisturbed, with no luggage or supplies, clearly not prepared for an imminent stay. abcnews.go.com. Chandler had underestimated how quickly the cabin could be checked. This discrepancy made officers suspicious that the cabin trip story was false, which it was. Additionally, a detective noted that Chandler's mention of his parents perhaps going to a casino was out of character, as Bart was known to be frugal and not a gambler. abcnews.go.com. These subtle details, the cars at home, the unused cabin, the uncharacteristic activities, all raised alarms in investigators' minds from early on. Despite these issues, Chandler worked hard to sell his story. On Wednesday, July 7th, after days of no word from his parents, Chandler called the Dane County Sheriff's Office to formally report Bart and Krista missing. abcnews.go.com. Notably, he only did this after being prompted by others, specifically Krista's co-worker. Krista was a reliable employee who never missed work without notice, so when she failed to show up on Friday, July 2nd, and then again after the holiday weekend, a concerned colleague went to the Halderson home. Chandler calmly told this colleague the same tale, that his parents had left for the cabin and must be out of cell range, perhaps staying longer due to a parade or extended vacation. The co-worker was uneasy but accepted the explanation initially. By Monday and Tuesday, when Krista still didn't appear or call in, the co-worker urged Chandler to contact the police. abcnews.go.com. Chandler acted like he was reluctant to make a big deal, but finally agreed. This behavior of delayed reporting is often a significant red flag in missing persons cases, especially when combined with dubious circumstances. A genuinely worried son might have called as soon as he couldn't reach his parents on Friday or Saturday. Chandler waited nearly a week. It suggests that he was hoping the situation might resolve without police, perhaps that he could buy more time to dispose of evidence. And only when external pressure mounted did he involve law enforcement. When he did speak to police on July 7th, Chandler stuck closely to his script. He provided a detailed timeline of July 1st, the last day he saw them, according to him, and the morning of July 2nd, when they left. He mentioned how he had helped them pack some tools because Bart supposedly wanted to fix a plumbing issue at the cabin CBSnews.com. This detail was likely added to explain why they would go up there and to account for any tools missing from the house, since Chandler had taken some for the dismemberment, such as the saw. He said they took some liquor and a large amount of cash with them, trying to imply they might have gone gambling or planned a special outing. Another attempt to make the trip sound real. He recounted mundane details like cooking them dinner on July 1st, pasta with scampi sauce, as he told one friend, and watching television together that night. All of this was an effort to humanize the last encounter and avoid sounding suspicious. During these initial interactions, neighbors and friends noted that Chandler's demeanor was perhaps a bit subdued and blank, but not outwardly panicked. This calmness was interpreted differently by different people. Some assumed he was just in shock or naturally reserved, while others quietly thought it odd that he wasn't more visibly upset or frantic about his missing parents. Crucially, Chandler actively engaged in efforts to find his parents, which, from a psychological perspective, is a common tactic used by guilty persons to deflect suspicion. He went door to door in the neighborhood with flyers, asking if anyone had seen Bart or Krista CBSnews.com. He called extended family to ask if his parents had contacted them. He spoke with the media, giving a brief interview to local reporters where he acted puzzled and hopeful for his parents' return. All these behaviors create the impression of a worried son and serve to embed the suspect in the center of the search efforts, which can sometimes make authorities less suspicious, because on the surface it looks like he's helping. However, seasoned investigators know that criminals often insert themselves into investigations. Thus, Chandler's prominent presence was not exculpatory. In fact, detectives found some of his actions quite performative. For example, one neighbor's security camera captured Chandler walking up their driveway with flyers. Then, as soon as he thought he was out of view, his concerned facade dropped and he glanced at his phone, looking bored. It was as if he was only acting out the role of distraught son when he knew eyes were on him. Another telling behavior during the cover-up was Chandler's communication via text messages. On Sunday, July 4th, he claimed to receive a text from his mother's phone saying, "We made it safely. Can you Venmo me $1 for the parade?" Implying Bart and Krista arrived at the cabin area and were going to see a holiday parade. Chandler showed this text to people as proof of life. But this detail backfired. The local Independence Day parade near their cabin took place on July 3rd, not July 4th. Investigators caught this discrepancy quickly, realizing Krista likely wouldn't confuse the date of the parade. That text was likely sent by Chandler himself, using his mother's phone, which he had in his possession, to create an illusion that his parents were alive on July 4th. The fact that he didn't know the correct parade date exposed his lie, an example of the kind of oversight that even careful liars can make. Moreover, cell tower data later showed Krista's phone never went anywhere near the cabin that weekend. It was last active in the vicinity of the Halderson home on July 4th when Chandler sent that fake text. abcnews.go.com. In a damning discovery, police searching the Halderson house eventually found Krista's phone hidden inside a shoe in the garage, wrapped in aluminum foil, possibly an attempt by Chandler to block any GPS or signal from the device, evidence that he had kept the phone and tried to hide it, further confirming he orchestrated the text message from it. Throughout the cover-up, Chandler had to manage not just the authorities, but also his girlfriend Kat and her family, who were part of his daily life. Here, his manipulative skills were on full display. Kat spent a significant amount of time with Chandler in the days following the murders, yet she suspected nothing. On Friday, July 2nd, the day after the killings, Chandler told Kat that his parents had left that morning and invited her over. That afternoon, a concerned coworker of Krista's actually came to the house while Kat was present. Chandler answered the door and calmly explained to the coworker that Krista was up north and probably just forgot to call in. He acted unfazed, and the coworker left only mildly reassured, still with a gut feeling something was off. abcnews.go.com. Kat, hearing this conversation, had no reason to doubt Chandler's story at that point. Chandler then proceeded to have a normal weekend with Kat. On July 2nd, they ran errands. Chandler even went to the store to buy cleaning supplies like hydrogen peroxide and a Swiffer mop, claiming he needed them to clean up the broken glass and blood from his toe injury. abcnews.go.com. Kat later recalled that on July 2nd, she indeed helped him clean up a broken glass pane in the fireplace and mop up some spots on the floor with peroxide, unwittingly assisting him in cleaning a crime scene. He gave every appearance that this was just routine household cleanup. On July 3rd, Chandler visited Kat at her house and hung out, seemingly relaxed. That evening, he took a solo drive, ostensibly to pick up some marijuana CBD from a friend, according to what he told Kat. This was actually when he drove to the Wisconsin River to dump Krista's remains. Kat noticed via Snapchat's Snap Map feature that Chandler's Bitmoji, avatar, was showing up near the Wisconsin River at that time, abcnews.go.com. When she asked him about it, he gave some vague explanation of being out for a drive. Kat didn't press further, but she found it curious enough that she later saved a screenshot of his location on Snap Map. That small act would later prove crucial. It time-stamped Chandler's presence at a key disposal site on July 3rd, directly linking him to the location where his mother's remains were found, abcnews.go.com. Psychologically, this shows how even someone as manipulative as Chandler can't control every variable. Digital footprints and the observations of others can pierce holes in a false narrative. Yet at the time, Kat didn't realize what she had. She was simply a bit confused why he'd driven out there. Chandler managed to divert her attention by the next day. On July 4th, Independence Day, Chandler and Kat spent the day together at a farm owned by Kat's mother's partner, the same farm where Bart's torso was hidden, although Kat didn't know that. They swam in the pool, grilled food, and socialized with Kat's family. Observers noted Chandler had a moment of apparent emotional breakdown that afternoon. Kat found him crying by himself. When she asked what was wrong, he claimed to be upset over losing the SpaceX job due to his recent injury. He framed it as frustration about his health and future, not anything to do with his parents. Kat consoled him, attributing it to stress from his concussion and his parents being away. In hindsight, one wonders if this breakdown was actually a brief wave of guilt or fear manifesting, which he quickly masked with a convenient explanation. Even someone high in psychopathic traits can feel stress when navigating such a high-stakes deception. Chandler had been juggling cleanup, evidence disposal, lying to multiple people, and maintaining a facade for days. The pressure was immense, and that moment by the pool might have been a crack in his emotional armor. But notably, he still did not confide in or slip up to Kat at all. Instead, he transformed that emotion into a self-pitying narrative. I'm sad about my lost job and my injury, which again made him the sympathetic figure. That night, July 4th, Chandler and Kat joined a neighbor, one of Krista's co-workers, Dan, to watch fireworks. The irony is palpable. While others celebrated the holiday, Chandler was celebrating the successful execution, so far, of his deceit. He even texted his older brother Mitchell, who lived elsewhere, to wish him a happy 4th and casually ask if he'd heard from their parents. Chandler knew full well Mitchell hadn't, since they were dead. But by asking, he created a false trail suggesting he himself was out of the loop and concerned. Mitchell responded that he hadn't, and he too grew worried when days passed with no contact. Finally, on July 7th, when law enforcement got involved, Chandler's cover-up began to crumble. The key break came not from an overt confession or forensic proof of murder initially, but from the inconsistencies and investigative leads that Chandler's story generated. For example, a neighbor in Chandler's own village of Windsor contacted police to report something strange. On July 5th, she saw Chandler's car backed into a wooded area near her property and observed him walking out of the woods alone at abcnews.go.com. She found it odd enough that she noted it, especially once she heard the Haldersons were missing. This was the tip that led police to search that area, the farm in Cottage Grove, where they discovered Bart's torso on July 8th, abcnews.go.com. It's worth noting how Chandler's attempt to hide evidence actually provided a direct clue to his guilt. If he hadn't returned to the farm on July 5th in broad daylight, that neighbor might not have noticed anything amiss. But his decision to make an extra trip, possibly to move the remains or ensure they were better hidden, created a witness account linking him to the disposal site cbsnews.com, cbsnews.com. Chandler's reaction to the slow unraveling of his cover story is telling. On July 8th, police asked him to come in for a second interview. At this point, Bart's remains had been found, though Chandler didn't know that initially. During a ride to the station, Chandler casually asked an officer whether there was a warrant for his house and what they were doing there. cbsnews.com. The officer noted that Chandler's tone changed when asking about the warrant. He seemed suddenly anxious and intent. For someone claiming to worry about his missing parents, Chandler's specific worry about a search warrant signaled that he was more concerned about police searching his property than anything else. Detectives took mental note. An innocent person usually welcomes a thorough search. Yes, please search everywhere for clues about my parents' disappearance. Whereas Chandler's reflex was to be alarmed that they might be in his house. This consciousness of guilt seeped through his otherwise controlled facade. Throughout the cover-up phase, Chandler leveraged lies on top of lies. His success in fooling people for even a short time came from a combination of detail and confidence. He provided just enough specific information to sound plausible, like the tools for the cabin plumbing repair or the friend's cabin detail, but not so much that it could be instantly debunked. And he delivered his story with a calm, almost flat affect that didn't match the circumstances, which in a counterintuitive way made some people think he might be telling the truth. Because who could stay that calm if they were lying about something so huge? However, his affect was too flat at times, raising quiet suspicions. One can imagine Chandler mentally rehearsing his narratives, anticipating what questions might be asked, and coming up with answers. This level of scheming suggests an individual who is high in the trait of planning and manipulation, again hinting at antisocial personality. He was effectively gaming the system, using the police and community's initial trust to direct attention away from himself. For a few days it worked. Search efforts were focused on campgrounds and roadsides on the route to the cabin, based on Chandler's suggestion that something might have happened to his parents on the way. Meanwhile, he likely felt a sense of control and even thrill that he was getting away with it. That thrill was short-lived. The sheer weight of evidence Chandler left behind, physical, digital, and behavioral, was too much to keep the truth buried for long. The police were already circling him as a suspect by July 8th, thanks to the neighbor's tip and the growing inconsistencies. Chandler did not realize that by then, officers had discovered Bart's dismembered remains on the farm and had zeroed in on him. They invited him for what he thought was another routine interview, but it was in fact an interrogation of the prime suspect. What happened in that interrogation room and how Chandler comported himself is our next focus, as it provides one of the clearest windows into his psychological state. Behavioral red flags in the police interrogation. Chandler Halderson's interrogation by Dane County detectives on July 8, 2021, is an invaluable segment to analyze in terms of criminal psychology. By this point, Chandler had been playing the role of the worried son for a week, but the accumulating evidence was pointing squarely at him. The police, suspecting foul play, approached the interview strategically, first letting him recount his story again, then gradually confronting him with their doubts, and finally the evidence of Bart's remains. Chandler's reactions, verbal and nonverbal, during this process are telling indicators of deceit, anxiety, and underlying personality traits. When Detective Brian Shunk and Detective Austin Hendrickson first began questioning Chandler, they kept a non-accusatory tone. Chandler, having no idea that part of his father's body had been found hours earlier, likely believed he still had a chance to persuade them of his innocence. He appeared composed, if subdued, as the interview started. Chandler spoke in a slow, measured way, recounting his activities during the July 4th weekend in extreme detail. What time he woke up, what video games he played, which chores he did, etc. This level of detail can sometimes be a red flag itself. Truthful individuals might not recall every mundane action with such precision, whereas liars often overcompensate by providing an exhaustive timeline to appear credible. Detectives noticed that Chandler's narrative seemed rehearsed, almost as if he had a checklist of points to cover. For instance, he made sure to mention the broken fireplace glass and toe injury incident, volunteering it proactively as if to plant that explanation firmly. cbsnews.com. Innocent people being questioned about their missing loved ones usually let officers lead the questioning and might even show confusion or gaps in memory due to stress. Chandler, by contrast, was methodical and complete in his answers, as if delivering a prepared speech. Observations of Chandler's body language reinforced suspicions. Throughout much of the interview, Chandler avoided direct eye contact with the detectives. He often cast his gaze downward or off to the side, especially when recounting key moments like saying goodbye to his parents. Occasional avoidance of eye contact can be normal. People often look away to recall memories. But Chandler's pervasive lack of eye contact struck investigators as abnormal for someone pleading truthfulness. When he did look at the detectives, it was often fleeting. The only time he held a detective's gaze for a sustained period was when he nervously asked about activity at his house. "Is there a warrant for my house? What are they up to?" CBSNews.com, at which point he stared intently, presumably to gauge their reaction. This sudden shift from almost no eye contact to intense eye contact was a glaring tell. It indicated that this topic, the search of his house, was critically important to him. It's common in interrogations that when a suspect's area of deception or concern is touched, their nonverbal behavior changes noticeably. Chandler's eyes were, figuratively, a window to his fear at that moment. Detectives also noted Chandler's self-soothing behaviors during questioning. He often rubbed his face, covered his mouth, or rested his head in his hands. Such gestures can signal anxiety or stress. It's the body's way of trying to comfort itself under pressure. Chandler was ostensibly there to help find his parents, yet he was displaying the stress cues of someone under accusation. He also yawned and sighed frequently, which can be a tactic to alleviate tension or even to feign a kind of nonchalant tiredness, as if to say, "I'm so exhausted by worry." The detectives, however, saw it as potentially indicative of deception-related anxiety. Throughout his recounting of events, Chandler's affect, emotional expression, was oddly flat or inappropriate. When describing, for instance, the alleged moment he last saw his parents, he did not show sadness or fear. His tone remained monotonous, as if he were describing a routine trip rather than a profoundly distressing situation of his parents disappearing. When he mentioned details that one would expect to upset him, for example, "That would be the last time I saw them alive," which he did acknowledge, he did so in a matter-of-fact way without a noticeable catch in his voice or tearfulness. At one point, Chandler did show a flash of emotion. As he talked about going to the police station to file the missing persons report on July 7th, he stumbled over the words, seemingly on the verge of tears or frustration when he couldn't recall the term missing persons report. He kept saying, "I went to make a thing, point, period, third," then got flustered. CBSNews.com. He put his head in his hands momentarily as if crying, but astute observers found this display unconvincing and abrupt. It came out of nowhere and disappeared just as quickly. It felt as though Chandler realized that not showing any emotion was looking bad. So he attempted a brief show of distress, but it wasn't commensurate with the situation and felt forced. Indeed, once that moment passed, he went back to his calm monotone. One striking aspect of Chandler's behavior was his inappropriate humor and detachment. Early in the interview, he recounted the fireplace glass incident, his cover story for The Blood. Chandler chuckled as he described how angry his dad was about the broken glass, and even quipped that maybe his father cut himself reaching into the fireplace, adding something to the effect of, "I don't doubt it, if he gets mad he's not thinking," in a slightly joking tone. He then made a quip like, "I guess if someone punches me in the face in jail, maybe they'll straighten my crooked nose," which he laughed off Oxygen.com. This was actually said later, during jail calls with Kat, but a similarly flippant style was noted in his interviews too. Such attempts at humor, especially dark or flippant humor, in the context of one's parents being missing and presumably possibly harmed, is very incongruent. Detectives noted it silently. A loving son doesn't normally crack jokes when mom and dad could be in danger. Chandler's inappropriate affect suggested emotional bluntness or shallow affect, another trait found in psychopaths, who often don't react with normal intensity to serious events. PsychologyToday.com. It could also have been a nervous response, but combined with everything else, it painted a picture of someone oddly unmoved by the gravity of the situation. As the interview progressed, and Chandler recounted how he spent the weekend his parents were away, detectives began confronting him on the known inconsistencies. They asked why he didn't mention his solo trip to the farm on July 5th. They already had the farm owner's statement that she saw him then. CBSNews.com, CBSNews.com. Chandler paused and fumbled, eventually admitting he went to the farm to talk to the owner about his health and swim a bit. This was a glaring omission from his initial timeline. He had tried to hide that outing entirely. When asked if he had gone anywhere else or done anything unusual, Chandler stuck largely to his false story, failing to account for his whereabouts during the time the murders and body disposals took place. Detectives let him talk, all while knowing these holes existed. Finally, about 2 hours into the interview, Detective Hendrickson made a pivot to the Reed technique-style confrontation. He told Chandler words to the effect of, "We know you're not telling us the truth. We know something bad happened to your parents. This is your chance to tell us why it happened, to tell your side of the story." CBSNews.com. The sudden direct accusation hit Chandler like a lightning bolt. His controlled demeanor faltered. At first, he stammered a partial denial, then fell silent. The detective pressed gently but firmly, saying they knew the parents were no longer alive. At that moment, Chandler's mask dropped. He realized they must have found something. His face reportedly flushed, and he drew in a sharp breath. All he managed to reply was a single word: lawyer. CBSNews.com. With that, he invoked his right to counsel and effectively ended the interrogation. This single-word response is telling. Rather than an outraged, "What? No, I had nothing to do with it," Chandler's instinct was to lawyer up immediately. Innocent people, when wrongfully accused, often react with confusion or vehement protest. "What do you mean they're not alive? What happened? I didn't do anything." Chandler did none of that. His very first reaction was essentially an admission that he could not continue talking without incriminating himself. From a psychological standpoint, his decision to cut off the interview confirms that he knew he was caught. It's also consistent with his generally calculative nature. Once confrontation was inevitable, he tried to minimize damage by staying silent. It's notable that until that moment, Chandler seemed to believe he could talk his way out. But as soon as detectives showed their hand, finding remains, his confidence evaporated. Immediately after Chandler requested a lawyer, detectives ceased questioning, but they arrested him on the spot for providing false information in a missing persons investigation, a lesser charge to hold him while they gathered full evidence. As he was being handcuffed and led away, officers observed that Chandler's earlier facade of calm had given way to visible nervousness. He was breathing rapidly, and his hands trembled slightly. Yet tellingly, he still did not ask any anguished questions about his parents' fate, which one might expect even a guilty person to at least feign, like, Are they dead? What happened to them? The absence of any such question from Chandler is very revealing. It's as if he had already accepted that outcome and only cared about his own predicament. In analyzing Chandler's interrogation behavior, experts have pointed out numerous classic indicators of deception he exhibited. For example, he often used distancing language, referring to his parents as they or them rather than mom and dad in certain moments, as if trying subconsciously to separate himself from them. He also repeated some questions before answering, a stalling tactic, and gave overly specific answers to simple questions. What time did you wake up? 6:15? Well, 6:20 maybe. I checked my phone at 6:18, etc. Whereas an honest person might say, around 6-ish, without worry. His timeline was a bit too perfect, which ironically made it suspicious. And of course, the content of his answers was provably false in several respects, like saying he only went to the farm on July 4th with Kat, omitting July 5th. Another aspect to consider is how Chandler's behavior contrasts with that of his girlfriend Kat, who was also interviewed separately that day. Kat, as a witness, was cooperative and open. She had minor inconsistencies, natural for someone recounting days of normal activity, but she brought her phone, showed texts, and even unknowingly gave evidence against Chandler, like the Snap Map screenshot. Kat's demeanor was confused, emotional, and she even physically trembled and felt sick. She had difficulty eating a cookie the detectives gave her, even though she ironically chose a chocolate one despite claiming to be allergic, possibly due to nerves clouding her judgment. These are all signs of someone under stress but not hiding a crime: genuine worry, physical discomfort, and emotive responses. Chandler, in contrast, maintained a cold steadiness until cornered. Kat cuddled a stuffed animal in the soft interview room to soothe herself, whereas Chandler sat rigidly in a standard interrogation room. The differences between them underscored to investigators who was being truthful and who was not. In summary, the interrogation was the crucible that tested Chandler's psychological mettle. The cracks that appeared, the abnormal body language, the flat effect, the ill-timed humor, and finally the collapse under direct accusation, all revealed the truth that Chandler had labored to hide. It was a textbook example of how law enforcement uses both evidence and behavioral psychology to break through a suspect's defenses. Chandler's behavioral red flags did not stand alone. They were interpreted in light of corroborating evidence, like the torso and the Snapchat data. But together, the signs were overwhelming. One detective later said that by the time Chandler walked into that interrogation, we knew he did it. We just wanted to see if he'd finally tell the truth. And Chandler's behavior essentially confirmed their suspicions even before he uttered, "Lawyer." CBSNews.com, CBS News. Having examined how Chandler acted under direct scrutiny, we now turn to an equally revealing angle: his dynamics with his girlfriend and how he continued to manipulate and interact with her even after his arrest. This will further illuminate his psychological profile, especially traits of manipulation, lack of remorse, and the chameleon-like ability to pretend affection and normalcy. The girlfriend's perspective, manipulation and denial. Chandler. Halderson's relationship with his girlfriend Catherine "Cat" Melander offers another lens through which to view his criminal psychology. How he treated Cat and how he involved her, intentionally or unintentionally, in the aftermath of his crimes highlights his manipulative nature and sheds light on his capacity for surface-level charm and deceit. Cat's perspective also allows us to see the contrast between Chandler's true self and the persona he projected to those who cared about him. Cat and Chandler had been dating for about 2 years by 2021. Cat was 21, a college student, and by all accounts a kind-hearted, somewhat naive young woman. She adored Chandler and believed in the bright future he painted for them. Chandler's lies about his schooling and job prospects weren't just told to his parents. Cat also fully believed he was soon moving her to Florida for his SpaceX job. She was even preparing for that major life change. Although interestingly, when asked later, Cat didn't know key details like which apartment complex they'd be living in. Chandler had vaguely told her, "It's all set," and she trusted him without requiring proofoxygen.com. This illustrates how successful his deception was on a personal level. He was able to inspire trust and confidence in his intimate partner to an extraordinary degree. It also suggests Cat was somewhat sheltered or inexperienced, perhaps explaining why she missed warning signs that others might catch. After the murders, which Cat had no knowledge of, Cat spent a great deal of time with Chandler. In fact, this was likely by Chandler's design. By keeping Cat close, he could monitor what she knew and ensure she wasn't independently uncovering anything. It also gave him a built-in alibi of sorts. If people saw him with Cat acting normal, they might assume everything was fine. And indeed, Cat initially served as something of a character witness for Chandler. When police first interviewed her, before they revealed their suspicions, she was defensive of him. She recounted how Chandler was devastated and stressed about his parents' disappearance, although she had to admit he didn't show it in typical ways. She said, "He's not the biggest emotional person. He expresses it in a different way." abcnews.go.com, abcnews.go.com, noting that he tended to dissociate and get quiet under stress, rather than outwardly panic. This insight from someone who knew him well actually matches the detective's observations of Chandler's flat effect. Cat unwittingly confirmed that he often seemed unemotional even when something was wrong, a clue that his emotional range was limited. During her police interview, Cat learned that Chandler had been lying about some matters. The detectives probed gently about his SpaceX job and school, suggesting inconsistencies. At first, Cat resisted any negative characterization of Chandler. When asked if she could even imagine Chandler harming his parents, she said emphatically, "No, that'd be crazy," and repeated that she couldn't see him doing that oxygen.com. She insisted he had a good relationship with them overall, aside from minor squabbles. However, the more the detectives pressed, the more Cat began to confront a terrifying possibility. They asked her to consider if Chandler might be involved, and why. She reflected on some of the conflicts Chandler had with his parents. The dispute over him repaying them money, the period they grounded him for lying, how Chandler had privately fumed that he was treated like a child or prisoner. She even recalled an incident where Chandler texted her something ominous about not telling his parents something, "With you there. You don't have to be there to watch them hit me." This suggested Chandler had told Cat he feared physical harm from his parents, which may or may not have been true. It could have been another ploy for sympathy. abcnews.go.com, abcnews.go.com. Nevertheless, Cat started connecting dots. You can sense in her interview transcript a gradual dawning of horror as she realized that the timeline and clues were not aligning with what Chandler had told her. One key realization for Kat was when detectives revealed that Chandler had been in her car a lot that weekend, and they wanted to take it for evidence. Kat was initially cooperative about giving her phone to verify their timeline. Though embarrassed about personal content, she agreed and even pinky promised an investigator to allow a limited search of only relevant dates. abcnews.go.com, abcnews.go.com. But when it came to her car, she became protective. I have places to be, that's my car. If I'm being cooperative, why do you have to take my car? She asked in frustration. abcnews.go.com, abcnews.go.com. The detective explained that since Chandler was now considered not just missing persons family but a suspect, anything he used, like her car, could have evidence. Kat's immediate response was telling. She said, "I'm sorry, I have to ask. Don't you need like a court order or something for that?" abcnews.go.com. In that moment, Kat pivoted from being Chandler's supportive partner to a person realizing she might be implicated or at least seriously inconvenienced by his actions. This protest indicated she was distancing herself slightly. No longer whatever you need, I'll help. But why should I lose my car over this? The investigators noted this shift. It wasn't that Kat suddenly believed Chandler did something horrible, but a seed of doubt had been planted. She was starting to feel the negative impact of his actions on her own life, and it shook her loyalty. Kat's mother also played a role in this saga. In a strange incident, while Kat was being interviewed, her mother, who was at a public safety training session at the time, was overheard on a phone call saying to Kat, "But you were not home that night," and then seemingly advising Kat to tell police she was home. This made the trainer suspicious enough to report it to police, concerned that Kat's mother might be trying to coordinate an alibi. It's unclear what that was about. Possibly a miscommunication, or the mother trying to ensure Kat didn't get tangled in suspicion. In any case, police thoroughly investigated Kat's whereabouts and eventually cleared her of involvement, concluding she truly had no knowledge of or role in the crime. abcnews.go.com. After Chandler's arrest on July 8th, one might expect Kat to cut ties immediately, feeling betrayed and horrified. Shockingly, that's not what happened, at least not right away. For several weeks, Kat continued to correspond with Chandler while he was in jail. This phase is illuminating for what it says about Chandler's manipulative abilities and Kat's psychological state of denial. In recorded jail calls and texts, Chandler and Kat frequently exchanged endearments and spoke as if they were still a team planning a future. Chandler, now behind bars, continued to lie and minimize, telling Kat things like, "The news is putting a bad spin on this. Don't believe it," and hinting that his lawyers would clear things up. Oxygen.com. Kat, perhaps clinging to the remnants of the person she thought she knew, told him she loved him and advised him on his appearance for court. "Wear your glasses, do your hair so people see you're not a monster." Oxygen.com. This is a poignant example of cognitive dissonance. Kat was grappling with the dissonant ideas that her loving boyfriend could also be a brutal murderer. Initially, she resolved that dissonance by deciding to believe him over the evidence, at least outwardly. Chandler exploited Kat's lingering affection skillfully. He spoke to her in pet names. "Good morning, wifey," he texted. She responded, "Good morning, hubby." Oxygen.com. He dangled fantasies of their future still, discussing buying an espresso machine together or how he would get a job as soon as he got out and compensate her for paying his lawyers. He even suggested that she could sell his jailhouse drawings as, "I'm apparently infamous now," to raise money, half-jokingly playing the card of notoriety. Oxygen.com. This shows narcissistic thinking. Even when accused of heinous crimes, he's considering how his infamy could be monetized and how he could continue to influence Kat's life. It's rather astonishing that Chandler's concern wasn't expressing remorse or worry about his situation, but rather maintaining control over his relationship and narrative. He likely realized Kat was his one remaining ally and tried to keep her on his side, possibly hoping she might testify favorably or at least not turn on him. At one point, Kat expressed to Chandler that she was fearful of being known as the girlfriend of the murderer and had faced unwanted media attention. Reporters literally knocked on her door at one point. Chandler's response was dismissive. He couldn't offer much beyond, "You know I can't talk about the case, but trust me." Their communication continued until late September 2021, when Kat finally ceased contact. The turning point isn't fully documented, but presumably as more evidence came out, perhaps after preliminary hearings or media coverage where the gruesome details were revealed, Kat had to accept that Chandler was not who she thought. It is also possible her family and friends and maybe therapy helped her break away from his influence. From a psychological perspective, Kat's initial support of Chandler illustrates a phenomenon known as betrayal blindness, or denial in close relationships. It can be incredibly hard for someone to accept that a loved one has done something atrocious. The mind resists it to protect itself. Thus, even in the face of mounting evidence, Kat clung for a time to the belief in Chandler's innocence. Chandler's ability to hold her in that limbo reflects his proficiency at emotional manipulation. He had effectively groomed her over their relationship to see him as harmless, goofy, maybe a bit of a victim of circumstance. So despite evidence of his lies, she learned he indeed lied about college and jobs. She compartmentalized that as, he lied but he wouldn't kill. Chandler's interactions with Kat also highlight his lack of remorse and accountability. In none of the jail communications does he appear apologetic, even in a vague way like, "I'm sorry you're going through this." He doesn't say that. He instead focuses on himself, how he is coping in jail, how the trial is going to be, how he will fix things after. This self-centeredness, even in private, is a classic narcissistic or psychopathic trait. If he truly loved Kat, one might expect him to express regret for ruining the future they planned. Instead, he talks as if that future is merely on hold and they'll pick up where they left off when he beats this. The disconnect from reality is striking. It suggests Chandler either delusionally believed he could get away with it, perhaps underestimating the evidence against him, or he was just stringing Kat along as a contingency, knowing deep down he was doomed, but wanting that emotional supply as long as possible. One might wonder, did Chandler ever truly care for Kat, or was she just another pawn in his game? It's impossible to know his inner feelings, but given his pattern of deceit and using people, there's a strong chance his attachment to her was shallow. Recall that friends noted he cheated on Kat repeatedly and lied to her frequently. CBSNews.com. He likely enjoyed the comfort and support she provided, but he wasn't committed in an honest or empathetic way. This again underscores Chandler's psychopathic leanings, using interpersonal relationships for personal gain or convenience without true loyalty or empathy. By the time of the trial in January 2022, Kat had distanced herself. In fact, she testified for the prosecution, providing evidence about the snap map and her observations of Chandler's behavior. This would have been an emotionally difficult step, essentially renouncing the man she thought she would marry. The fact she did so indicates she finally resolved her cognitive dissonance in favor of accepting the hard truth. For Chandler, this was a loss of the last person who treated him kindly after the murders. However, even in court, he showed minimal reaction to her testimony. Observers said Chandler largely sat emotionless as witness after witness, including Kat recounted damning evidence. If anything, he looked more sullen or embarrassed than heartbroken. In sum, Chandler's dynamic with Kat exemplifies his surface-level charm, manipulativeness, and emotional callousness. He was able to string along a smart young woman who loved him, even while living a double life and committing unspeakable acts. Post-crime, he continued the charade of being a loving boyfriend to maintain influence. Kat's eventual awakening and cooperation with law enforcement helped seal Chandler's fate. But it's chilling to consider how, if not for a few smart detectives and digital breadcrumbs, Chandler might have kept Kat and others fooled for much longer. His ability to lie with conviction was a key tool in his psychological arsenal. Having examined Chandler's actions and behavior through all these stages, the lies, the murders, the cover-up, the interrogation, and his relationship management, we can now synthesize these observations into a coherent psychological profile. The final section will discuss what underlying traits and disorders Chandler appears to exhibit, how professionals and the court characterized him, and what lessons can be drawn about criminal psychology from this case. Pathology of a liar. Psychological profile of Chandler Halderson. Chandler Halderson's case is a textbook illustration of how certain pathological personality traits can culminate in extreme criminal behavior. While we cannot diagnose Chandler definitively without a formal psychiatric evaluation, the patterns of his behavior align closely with traits associated with antisocial personality disorder, ASPD, particularly the subset of ASPD known as psychopathy, as well as aspects of narcissistic personality disorder. Throughout this analysis, several key traits have repeatedly emerged. Pathological lying. Chandler lied about virtually every meaningful aspect of his life, creating a fantastical persona that bore little resemblance to reality. He lied easily, frequently, and without apparent guilt, even to those he supposedly loved. Pathological lying is a core feature of psychopathy psychology, today.com Psychology Today. And is often motivated by a desire to manipulate or create a false self-image. Chandler's lies served both instrumental purposes, avoiding consequences, getting what he wanted, and ego-driven purposes, maintaining a facade of success. The sheer breadth of his deceit, from fake emails to voice-altered phone calls, shows how lying was practically second nature to him. Detective Sabrina Sims succinctly noted, "He just lied to everybody, and it was those lies that ultimately formed the motive for his murders." CBSNews.com. Manipulation and conning. Chandler didn't just lie. He actively conned people into doing things for him or believing in him. He conned his parents into financing his lifestyle under false pretenses. He conned Kat into thinking he was a faithful, ambitious partner. He attempted to con the police with his elaborate missing persons act. This manipulative behavior, especially when done without remorse, is another hallmark of psychopathy psychology, today.com. Chandler often treated people as means to an end. His parents were providers of comfort and could be discarded when they questioned him. His girlfriend was a convenient ally and emotional prop. Even friends existed to stroke his ego or provide services. One friend suspected Chandler stole money from him when they were roommates, a very exploitative act. The selfish exploitation of others with charm and lies is captured in the psychopathy checklist traits of conning, manipulative, and parasitic lifestyle psychology, today.com, both of which Chandler exhibited. Grandiose sense of self and narcissism. The persona Chandler projected was one of an overachiever. He clearly wanted to be seen as important, skilled, and successful. This suggests a strong narcissistic streak. He boasted of achievements, even though they were fake, and seemed to genuinely enjoy the admiration he got from family for his supposed SpaceX job and other feats. His unwillingness to let the facade crumble indicates that his self-esteem was entirely hitched to this grandiose false self. Narcissistic individuals can react with rage or desperation when faced with humiliation or exposure, a phenomenon known as narcissistic injury. Chandler's murderous response to his lies being uncovered fits this pattern. Being revealed as a fraud would shatter his identity, so he took drastic action to prevent that. Additionally, his continued belief in jail that he could beat the charges or that he and Kat would still have a future shows a kind of grandiose denial of reality. Even as evidence mounted, Chandler seemed to think he could outsmart the system or charm a jury, a form of arrogance common in narcissistic or psychopathic offenders. Lack of remorse or empathy. Perhaps the most chilling aspect of Chandler's psychology is his apparent lack of remorse. At no point did he express genuine sorrow for killing his parents. He cried for himself, when cornered in interrogation or lamenting his lost job, but not for them. Prosecutors observed that there was not even a moment that he mourned his parents after they were gone. Oxygen.com. Indeed, in the immediate aftermath, he was mainly concerned with covering his tracks, and later, in jail, concerned with his own future. Lack of remorse is a central trait of psychopathy psychology, today.com. Similarly, Chandler's actions exhibit a profound lack of empathy. Dismembering one's parents and then acting as though nothing happened requires one to override the basic human feelings of empathy, love, and respect for others. He reduced his parents to objects, quite literally, in how he treated their remains. When discussing his father's anger or injuries, he showed glibness or even amusement, indicating he didn't emotionally register his parents' pain. All of this places him high on the callous, unemotional spectrum. In court, his affect remained flat, even as graphic evidence was shown. No recoiling, no visible sadness. Observers often interpret that kind of courtroom demeanor as either stoicism or indifference. Given what we know, indifference is the likelier explanation. Shallow effect and superficial charm. Chandler could turn on superficial charm when needed. Friends described him as a fun guy, a goof who made jokes and was socially active. CBSNews.com. He didn't come off as menacing or strange to those around him. If anything, he was seen as friendly if somewhat lazy. However, the depth of his emotional life appears shallow. He could mimic the outward display of emotion, like telling Kat "I love you" frequently or feigning concern, but these seem to lack sincerity given his actions. His emotional reactions often did not fit the context, for example, being jovial during a missing person search, or detached when serious topics arose. This superficiality is another psychopathic trait. They can display emotion without feeling it, and they often have a narrow range of genuine emotion, usually revolving around their own needs, like anger when provoked or satisfaction when getting their way. PsychologyToday.com. Irresponsibility and parasitic lifestyle. Prior to the murders, Chandler demonstrated a pattern of irresponsibility. He failed out of college but didn't tell anyone, effectively wasting tuition money and time. He quit jobs or lost jobs, or never had them to begin with, yet lied about it instead of trying to fix his situation. He lived off his parents' support while contributing little. He made promises like moving to Florida, with no plan or means to fulfill them. All of this points to someone who avoids responsibility and instead leeches off others' efforts. In this case, his parents' financial support and patience. Oxygen.com. The Psychology Today article on psychopathy lists parasitic lifestyle right alongside lack of empathy and lying as a key sign. PsychologyToday.com, and Chandler fits that perfectly. He expected his parents to house, feed, and bankroll him indefinitely while he indulged in video games at home. Only when they demanded he step up, like repaying money or showing proof of his endeavors, did conflict arise. Failure to accept responsibility and blaming others. Even after being caught, Chandler never truly accepted responsibility. He pled not guilty, forcing a trial where the evidence was overwhelming, and to this day, he has never publicly admitted guilt or expressed remorse. Instead, he launched an appeal on technicalities, a no-merit appeal, which his own lawyer filed, essentially saying there's no valid issue but fulfilling his wish to appeal. This stubborn refusal to admit wrongdoing, despite the facts, underscores an inability to accept responsibility, another trait on the psychopathy checklist. PsychologyToday.com. Before his capture, whenever problems arose in his life, Chandler tended to blame external factors: the college's bureaucracy for not sending transcripts, the internship's payroll system for not paying him, his parents for being too demanding or strict, etc. Nothing was ever his fault in his narrative. This externalization of blame is common in criminals with antisocial traits. They often see themselves as victims of circumstance or persecution, rather than as the architects of their own misdeeds. In the trial and sentencing, professionals effectively described Chandler in these terms without using the clinical labels. Prosecutors called him a chronic liar and calculating sociopath who spun an amazing web of lies leading up to and following the murders. Oxygen.com. The judge, in denying any possibility of parole, highlighted the cold-blooded nature of Chandler's choices, emphasizing that when confronted with a relatively normal life setback, Chandler resorted to extreme, abhorrent violence. Oxygen.com. This assessment aligns with the idea that Chandler lacks normal psychological regulation or moral restraints. The dismemberment aspect of the case especially convinced the court of Chandler's dangerousness. As the judge noted, releasing him would pose an unimaginable risk because someone who can do what he did, calmly cut up and dispose of bodies, does not have the empathy or inhibition to live safely among society. Oxygen.com. Oxygen.com. It's a level of depravity and capability for violence that goes beyond even the act of murder itself. It suggests that given the right, or rather wrong circumstances, Chandler could potentially harm others if it benefited him, without hesitation. One might ask whether Chandler's youth, 23 at the time, played a role. Was this a case of a young person making a catastrophic impulsive decision, or was it the flowering of a long-standing personality disorder? Based on evidence, Chandler had shown problematic behavior for years: habitual lying, lack of long-term goals, entitlement, and minor unethical acts, like stealing from a roommate. These are not sudden occurrences but part of a pattern, indicating a characterological issue rather than a one-time lapse. His age might have contributed to the particular stresses, for example, being at an age where he should be finishing college and starting a career, which might have amplified his fear of being seen as a failure. But plenty of 23-year-olds face those pressures without turning into murderers. It's the combination of personality pathology and situational stress that was lethal here. Arguably, if this confrontation with truth had occurred when he was 30 or 40, a person with the same traits might have done something similar. Age did not imbue him with conscience or coping skills. It's also instructive to consider that Chandler hinted at his own dark tendencies to some peers. Recall that one ex-girlfriend said Chandler told her he had been diagnosed as a psychopath and said, "Makes sense now, doesn't it?" in a half-joking manner. He also used a voice changer to pretend to be someone else on at least one occasion with his parents, a rather elaborate deception that normal people wouldn't even think of. These anecdotes suggest Chandler might have been aware on some level that something was off in his way of thinking. Yet instead of seeking help, he seemed to almost take pride in it or use it as a tool. Psychopaths often know they are different. They just don't care to change, except to become better at getting what they want. Chandler's comments to friends that he could look in my safe, but don't judge me for what you find, which the friend avoided doing, fearing what that meant, also give the sense he was harboring dark secrets or inclinations even before the crime. Another facet to address is the immaturity Chandler exhibited. Despite being 23, he was in many ways emotionally stuck in adolescence. He retreated into video games and online interactions, avoided adult responsibilities, and even did things like build a couch cushion fort to sleep in after the murders, an oddly childish coping mechanism for a man who had just committed double homicide. This immaturity likely intersected with his narcissism. He wanted the privileges of adulthood, freedom, respect, a prestigious job, but not the duties, work, honesty, effort. When forced into a corner, he reacted in an infantile all-or-nothing way, akin to a child who breaks the toy they can't have. This doesn't excuse anything but provides context. Chandler was not a criminal mastermind with an organized life. He was, in many respects, a failure to launch individual whose personal failings curdled into violent entitlement. From a forensic psychology standpoint, Chandler Halderson scores high on many items of the Hare psychopathy checklist. Glibness, superficial charm. Yes, to those who knew him casually. Grandiose sense of self-worth. Yes, in his fantasies. Pathological lying. Absolutely. Manipulative. Yes. Lack of remorse or guilt. Yes. Shallow affect. Yes. Callous. Lack of empathy. Clearly given what he did. Parasitic lifestyle. Yes. Lack of realistic long-term goals. Yes, all his goals were delusions. Irresponsibility. Yes. Failure to accept responsibility. Yes. He might not tick some other boxes, for instance, early juvenile delinquency, or many short-term relationships were not indicated, though he did cheat a lot. But with so many traits present, one could reasonably surmise he falls on the psychopathic spectrum. psychologytoday.com, psychologytoday.com. It's important to note that not all psychopaths become violent criminals. Many confine themselves to white-collar crimes or simply wreak havoc in personal relationships. In Chandler's case, the combination of his psychopathic traits with a high-stakes situation, impending exposure, and access to weapons opportunity led to horrific violence. He crossed a line that even many liars wouldn't, which is what makes this case so stark. It demonstrates that psychology and circumstance together produce outcomes. If Chandler had never been challenged, perhaps he would have continued mooching and lying for years without physical harm to anyone. But the moment his back was against the wall, the true danger of his psychology manifested. Finally, what lessons does Chandler Halderson's case offer? For one, it shows the importance of recognizing red flags in behavior. Hindsight is 20/20, but some who knew Chandler, like his former roommate and even his brother to an extent, sensed something was off about how easily he lied or how he shirked life tasks. If interventions or serious conversations had happened earlier, maybe things would be different or maybe not, given his lack of honesty. It also underlines how extreme entitlement, a you owe me attitude taken to the max, can breed resentment that leads to violence. Bart and Krista likely never imagined their son would hurt them. They were just trying to help and then hold him accountable. Tragically, their kind hearts were betrayed by someone incapable of reciprocating love or respect. For mental health professionals, the case is a reminder that individuals who exhibit a cluster of behaviors like Chandler's, chronic lying, blaming others, lack of empathy, should be evaluated carefully, especially if stressors, like big life changes or exposures, are on the horizon. It's rare, but as seen here, such people can commit severe violence with little warning. In the end, Chandler Halderson was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to life in prison without parole. The judge and jury effectively ensured that his reign of deception and violence ended there. In prison, away from society, Chandler has little ability to harm others, though one wonders how someone wired like him navigates a setting where manipulation and lack of remorse are hardly unique traits. Interestingly, he reportedly adjusted to jail in a self-preserving way, even telling Kat on a call not to worry about him because others stay clear of me, and that he was in a mental health unit so likely safe from general population conflicts. Even behind bars, his focus was on managing his image and situation, not reflecting on his crimes. Conclusion. The story of Chandler Halderson is a harrowing journey into the mind of a young man who valued his lies and ego above human life. His psychological profile, characterized by deceit, manipulation, narcissism, and callousness, enabled him to commit crimes that are almost incomprehensible in their brutality. By analyzing his behavior across different contexts, we see a consistent thread. Chandler sought to maintain control and avoid shame at any cost, whether through smooth-talking deception or, when that failed, through cold-blooded murder. This case underscores that not all criminals fit the stereotypical mold. Chandler was not an obvious menace. He was the polite son next door who joked with friends and was doted on by his parents. His dark traits were largely hidden beneath a veneer of normalcy, a chilling reminder that some of the most dangerous individuals are those who can mask their true selves in everyday life. The unraveling of Chandler's lies and the way he responded provides a clear example of how a psychologically disordered individual can escalate from nonviolent dishonesty to extreme violence when their needs and self-image are threatened. In Chandler's psychological universe, people were chess pieces to be moved or removed in service of his narrative. When his king, himself, was in check, he swept the board clean with carnage rather than admit defeat. It is a mindset alien to the average person, but through careful analysis we can identify its components and warning signs. Chandler Halderson will spend the rest of his life in prison, but the analysis of his criminal psychology will remain relevant as we strive to understand and prevent such tragedies in the future. In the end, perhaps the biggest takeaway is a human one. Empathy is the cornerstone of humanity, and when an individual lacks it entirely, the results can be devastating. Chandler's case asks us to consider the value of truth, accountability, and compassion, the qualities he so conspicuously lacked. It is a cautionary tale of how one person's psychological dysfunction, if unchecked, can destroy even the strongest bonds of family and love. In the quiet suburb of Windsor, Wisconsin, a bright facade concealed a nightmare, and by studying that nightmare, we hope to recognize the next one before it's too late.